Mr. Corral, I did hear the recording has started, correct? All right, very good. Thank you. It is now 9 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting of the WIFA Board with a roll call for members' attendance. Ted Cook. Here. Patrice Horseman.
Here.
Drew John. Here. Pete Kim. Here. Donna Michaels.
Here.
Stephen Miller.
Here. Present.
Sue Montgomery.
Here.
Tim Tamir.
Here.
En route.
En route.
And Jonathan Lyons, thank you. We do have a quorum. Now I'll call on the non-voting members. Elizabeth Alvarado Thorson. Tom Bushatsky.
Laney Meeker for Director Bishotsky.
Thank you, Laney. Gail Griffin. Lauren Kuby. Karen Peters.
Here.
Robin Said. TJ Shope. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. And Sandra Watson. Roll call is complete.
Mr. Chair, I will note that Representative Stahl Hamilton is in fact on the line. I think we just need to add her as a panelist.
Okay.
So
You'll take care of that. I will mark her as here. Thank you very much. For the record, please remember to identify yourself when making a motion or requesting to speak. Please ensure you are unmuted for any votes. And for those in the room, please remember to leave the microphones on the table for sound quality purposes. In addition, if any board member wishes to depart the meeting at any time, please announce your departure for our recorded meeting minutes. Item number 2, Mr. Satelli, do we have any disclosures for conflicts of interest?
Good morning, Judge Satelli, General Counsel. No disclosures have been submitted for today's meeting.
All right, thank you very much. Agenda item number 3, a presentation from the Central Arizona Project. I'd like to welcome Patrick Bent, Water Policy Director for CAP, to the podium. Patrick is here to share an update on the impact of the post-2026 Colorado River operational guidelines on Central Arizona Project. And Patrick, thank you for your time, and the floor is now yours.
say green.
It's now green. Good morning. My name is Patrick Dent. As Director Lyons introduced me, I am a Assistant General Manager over Water Policy at the Central Arizona Project, and for the record, delighted to be here today to talk a little bit about the current status of the Colorado River. Before I jump into my slides, which will mostly be about the final environmental impact statement that was released on July 31st, just wanted to make a few points about the serious hydrologic condition on the Colorado River. I have not included a hydrology update in my presentation. We're expecting the August 24-month study to come from Reclamation any day now, but I would like to make a few kind of high-level points. The storage on the Colorado River system, both Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which are the major reservoirs, but also Flaming Gorge Reservoir, will probably spend the next 4 to 6 months at historic lows. The system overall is at a historic low as compared to when the reservoirs were filled. And there's really only a few million acre feet of what I'll call usable or discretionary storage in both Mead and Powell. The release from Glen Canyon Dam to Lake Mead this year, and by this year I mean the water year, which will end on October 1st, 2026, is 6 million acre feet. Because that release is what I'll say at least 2 million acre feet lower than what the guidelines would recommend, and 2 million acre feet lower than where we would roughly achieve a balance between inflow and outflow at Lake Mead. Lake Mead will probably decline by 25 feet through the 2026 water year. There's a lot riding on winter 26-27. I'll talk briefly about what I know about the guidelines for next year. They have not been released yet. We're still waiting on a record of decision from the United States to tell us about the operations for water year 26-27. But potentially they could include low releases again. I think it's our at least initial calculation is that if the release is below 7 million acre feet in 2027, there will likely be consultations about additional reductions over what the lower basin states have negotiated even starting as early as a year from now. So hydrologic conditions could improve. We could get a release that would at least let us tread water through the 2027 operating year. And then, of course, we'd be looking to the next winter again. So start most of my presentations with crappy news. This one's no exception. And
Patrick, if I may, real quick, just because we've got a packed agenda, could I ask you to conclude exactly at 9:30 or before?
I can
Okay.
conclude at exactly 9:30. If I knew where 9:30 was,
All right.
You got 25 minutes. Yeah.
thanks.
Look at the attorney.
Okay. If someone can track me, I will do that. What time is it now, Mr. Satelli? 9:05. All right. I think I can make it. Maybe it didn't sound like it by the way I was getting started. It's like he's going to be up there all day. No, that is not my intention. I have some other things to do. So, wanted to start with earlier this year, Reclamation released a draft EIS. I do have my slides are a little dense. I'm not going to go through all the words on them. There is much for your quick reference about the environmental documents that have been prepared for the post 2026 guidelines as anything else. But I'll just speak in some generalities about the approach that the United States has taken. These are alternatives that they had put out in the draft EIS earlier this year. There was, I think, over 26,000 comments about these. They included a range of potential actions that the United States could take, but because there was no agreement, there was no preferred alternative associated with these alternatives. All of these were, though, carried forward in the draft or in the final environmental impact statement. And Reclamation, at least at the time the draft was released, was consistent in saying, well, we want to leave space for some agreement to emerge or to be negotiated or for the secretary to make a specific decision. But we think the collection of these alternatives analyzed will give us sufficient environmental clearance to make a decision that might emerge. And we'll continue to work with the state parties and other stakeholders to formulate those agreements. The one nuance in the federal environmental impact statement that was released was they put out a preferred alternative, which I think by NEPA process they are required to do. The preferred alternative didn't include a specific decision either. It was a framework. They used the word sideboards of the ranges of potential actions they could take for critical operational decisions on the Colorado River, like how much shortage to implement in the lower basin, how much water and when to make those decisions from. Actually, they didn't include that. How much shortage to implement in the lower basin, how much water to release from Lake Powell, how much water we might release from the upper initial units under certain conditions. They didn't define those specifically for the next 2 years. They said, well, we can release between, I believe it's 5. Oh, I have it here. We can implement up to 3 million acre feet of shortage in the lower basin if we need to. We won't do that. We reserve the right under law to do that. And we expect to implement agreements that lower basin parties would put together or the 7 states would put together to make that decision. But we've analyzed up to 3 million acre feet of shortage, and we believe the secretary could implement should they choose to do so in the absence of water user agreements. The release from Glen Canyon Dam could be somewhere between 5 and 12 million acre feet, a huge range, essentially encompassing any operations that they might consider. They've been quite vocal about their need to protect essentially the power intakes at Glen Canyon Dam, and guidelines that they've been considering do that. And decision-making, they do that, including this year, the basis for the 6 million acre feet release. They are open and wanted to have environmental clearance for continuation of the ICS program, which is essentially the ability to identify conservation among contractors in the lower basin and leave that water in the system, both for the benefit of the elevations, but also so the specific conservers of that water might have access to it under certain conditions. Of note, the accumulation volumes or the amount that could be stored by state under the 2007 guidelines and DCP, those were essentially maxed out, if you will. They were full. This expands that program and would potentially make additional space that could be where water user or contractors could store water in the reservoir. There's a note about a provision for surplus. Not going to spend a lot of time on that. And then there are some environmental work associated with if the Upper Basin were to enter into conservation programs, the potential that they could essentially have some storage program in Lake Powell to participate similarly to the Upper Basin. So those are the sideboards. There's some detail about them. I think these are kind of maybe the main points from the Lower Basin's perspective or from CAP's perspectives about the FEIS and at least where we are right now. The Lower Basin has been working on a 2-year operational agreement. We made a proposal back in May, but essentially the proposed minimum 2-year operational agreements on the Colorado River will leave the parties essentially in constant negotiation on operations. I don't think it's that funny, but we've spent 4 years negotiating the 2-year agreement. I don't see that as particularly sustainable going forward. And so there will be challenges and will be continued negotiation, yes, and potentially litigation on some of these proposed actions that the secretary could take. I mentioned in my opening remarks that a release less than 7 million acre feet, we said could be devastating. What I mean is that could lead to consultation about additional cuts. And the Lower Basin has been firm in that the level of reductions that they've put on the table for next year are consistent with things they've agreed to. Additional cuts would include participation with the Upper Basin, which has been refused to this point. It's unclear how the upper initial units will be used. That would be Flaming Gorge, Blue Mesa, and Navajo to support elevations in Lake Powell. This year, there's about 1 million acre feet being released from Flaming Gorge to prop up Lake Powell, but that still leaves a lot of discretion. And the Upper Basin has been relatively or extremely assertive that they have a lot of control or right influence over what decision-making might occur to operate those units. Reclamation has said that in the absence of agreement, they would follow kind of their contractual interpretation of the priority system. For CEP, that's particularly concerning because of a shortage of even less than 3 million acre feet that could take water availability to the Central Arizona project to essentially zero. Reclamation didn't consider other ways to protect infrastructure, like operating below the power pole at Glen Canyon Dam or fixes that they might consider in appropriate timeframes is an issue. And then none of the alternatives do consider any sort of consideration of the compact, which is of a paramount concern in the Lower Basin. So I think those are our high-level thoughts on what we saw in the FEIS. Certainly that's feedback that we've provided to the United States. So where are we today? We're waiting for a record of decision on at least the 2027 and 2028 operating rules. We have been expecting that really all of this month. We're even today, being the 19th of August, a few days past when the 24-month study is usually available for the forecasted operations. I do expect that Reclamation, but don't know for certain, will release a ROD soon and the 24-month study to be included with it. The operating guidelines will presumably be an attachment or included in that decision for 27 and 28. We have the expectation that those will be largely consistent with what the Lower Basin proposed. But again, there has been consistent dialogue back and forth, and Reclamation has not made a final decision on that. A UIU agreement or operation of the upper initial units. Frankly, the Lower Basin has very little purview of that. We have a lot of concerns, again, about the asserted influence in that agreement that the Upper Basin has been inserting, including voting on what the releases be, timing about when they would occur, under what conditions they might make. I think there'll still be significant concern in the Lower Basin about how the upper initial units are potentially operated. And then a lower basin agreement is still not signed. That's work that needs to be conducted quickly. But the lower basin agreement, at least in principle, has been agreed to by Nevada, California, and Arizona. And that would, the key element of that would be the implementation of the shortage sharing, which has been discussed for, frankly, a couple of years now, where California will be contributing 440,000 acre feet, Arizona 760, and Nevada 50,000 acre feet. My last slide. So hopefully I'm sliding in on time pretty well. Thanks. I can tell jokes with 15 minutes left. I did want to share just the 760,000 acre foot reduction for the Central Arizona project. This graphic is one we commonly use, but I'll just take a moment to describe it. This is essentially a bar chart that reflects the total water supplies available to the Central Arizona project. It's organized in priority with the highest priority. It's organized in CAP priority with the highest priorities being at the bottom of the chart and the lowest priorities being at the top. And then the grayed out sort of graphic there reflects where the 760,000 acre foot would cut to. So if CAP had a full supply, there'd be a delivery volume of really close to 1.6 million acre feet. I think the last time we delivered a volume close to that would have been in the 2013, 2014 timeframe. That's when we started entering into agreements to reduce overall CAP use. 760,000 acre feet would cut us to just below 900,000 acre feet. That would cut into the Indian and M&I priority water. So there would, in the water uses that have already been cut through existing programs or mandatory reductions, that's essentially wiped out a lot of the agricultural sediment pool, which was mostly agricultural deliveries in Pinal County, and Maricopa and Arcoala out west. But and then the NIA priority water was lower priority CAP water that was allocated to tribes and cities. That water has only been available in part since 2022. This year in 2026, essentially very little of the NIA pool was available. But in 2027, if we implement, this will be the first time that we've actually had to cut into the higher Indian priority water and the M&I priority water. As of note, that in Arizona triggers the actions, potential firming actions of the Arizona Water Bank. There have been discussions of the water bank about making some of those stored water available for 2027. The bank has put out a 1-year policy in part to provide what we call 100% firming, or of that 14% cut that CAP is estimating right there. All of that deficit would be made available in groundwater credits to those contractors who are seeing that reduction. But the bank wants to have a discussion about that going forward in the anticipation of persistent cuts this deep or deeper to CAP uses. The longevity of those credits is a significant policy issue. And so in 2027, the bank has purported that we'll have additional discussions about that. There's some notes on the board, and I wanted to point out some of those. Particularly, there's a sub-bullet there that says 20,000 acre feet from Yuma Wells and 40,000 acre feet from Lake Pleasant. CAP is working to try to offset a portion of these reductions. The Yuma Wells is a project that we've been working on with Yuma County Water Users Association that would pump drain water, and it could be delivered in satisfaction of the Treaty to Mexico at the southern international boundary. There's been space, if you will, that hasn't been used in recent years for that drain water to count against Arizona's entitlement. And so that would be delivered in that way. And then as CAP is kind of the junior priority user, that additional water volume would cascade to the Central Arizona project. That'll partially offset. That's still kind of in the agreement phase, but we're hopeful we can get that put in place next year. And we're working with our water users currently, and we'll continue to do so through the rest of this year to figure out how we're going to implement these reductions for CAP water users. So with that, the next thing to happen is a rod, and maybe this week is Wednesday already, so I'm not going to be too bullish, but maybe this week, maybe by the end of the week or next, but we are expecting it any day now. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about my presentation.
Do you have any questions from the board? Ted?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Patrick, do you mind going back to your slide on the FEIS? With the
I realized I have 2 more slides after that.
Uh-oh.
They were just some press comments about it.
Oh, okay.
Concern in the lower basin and elation in the. Did I skip past
That one. No, next one.
I think I skipped past it. This one or
Yeah,
the
maybe
summary one?
that one right there.
That one right there.
Yeah. So this is a question. I think I know the answer to a lot of my question here, but I think to help put things in perspective when we're talking about potentially 7 million acre feet or less coming from Lake Powell, and why, and what would happen to Lake Mead as a result of that. So my question is this, and you made reference to, there's a couple of bullets on there. It's unclear how the upper initial units are being used to protect the lower basin deliveries and Glen Canyon Dam infrastructure. And then a couple bullets down, significant concerns that reclamation did not consider alternative ways to protect infrastructure. So it's kind of a 2-part question. Number one, aren't there several, or at least more than one, existing federal laws that prioritize water deliveries above power generation?
There are,
Okay,
including the act that authorized that specific.
exactly. Building those particular dams. And then number 2, that protecting infrastructure at Lake Powell, I think, includes both the power intake structure and the power block, but also the outlet works. So how much water is approximately between elevation 3,500-ish, which is where the power elevation protection level, and 3,370 or whatever it is at the outlet works? How much water is there that's basically being left there to preserve the infrastructure at Glen Canyon Dam?
About 4.4 million acres.
Okay. So this is not available to, at least as under Reclamation's reckoning, to make deliveries. Does that count toward, say, and you may or may not know the answer to this, does that count toward the Secretary's determination under the Colorado River Basin Project Act of 1968 about determining whether or not the CAP junior priority is triggered?
Right. If the question is, do they consider that?
Yeah,
I don't think
as available.
I don't think they would consider that water as available.
Okay.
The implementation of shortage in the FEIS is analyzed, did not include that water.
Okay. What I'm getting at here for everybody else is that CAP, my reading, I'm not a lawyer, of the CAP junior priority as defined in the authorizing legislation for CAP does not occur unless the Secretary makes a determination that there is not 7.5 million acre feet available on the main stem for delivery to the lower basin. But they're excluding 4 million acre feet that's sitting in Lake Powell that they're not willing to release because it will potentially damage the infrastructure in some way.
That's correct. There's maybe other things that would be considered there as well, including water held in the upper units.
There's that too. Yeah.
They should consider deficiencies under the delivery obligations associated with the compact. So,
Thank you for that.
all right.
Any other questions? Patrick, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to report. Hopefully you'll invite me back some other time after there is a decision.
Appreciate it. We'll go to agenda item number 4, Director Report, Director McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to keep it short and sweet because I don't know if you noticed, but we've got a bit of an agenda here today. So just a couple of reminders for the board. The first is that the eligibility verification surveys that we talked about a few meetings ago when we updated our board and committee's policy, it's just an annual beginning of the fiscal year survey to verify statutory eligibility for our members to continue to serve. We needed to get that written and then approved and helped out with our outside legal counsel. That has been done. So expect those to be coming into your inboxes from Joe here in the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to him. And the other thing I will flag, and I'm sorry, Ricardo, I didn't say I was going to do this, but we do have a new hire who I want to introduce. Ricardo Gonzalez is our new accounting manager here at WIFA. He replaces Derek Bosworth. I think a few of you knew him. He left us for some new opportunities in the private sector, and Ricardo agreed to come on and join us. We've been really happy to have him. I know Denise is very happy to be back to full strength in that team. So if you get a chance, go introduce yourself, meet him. He's been a great addition to the team. And that's all I've got so far.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 5, External Affairs Report, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll invite Judy Waxabaum, our Chief of Government Affairs, up.
Hello, everyone. Wow, that is loud this time. Since we all last met, SB 1560, our legislation to raise the loan cap on the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund from $3 million to $20 million, has been signed into law. We are very excited about that. That will go into effect next month on September 12th. That's the general effective date for laws this year, 90 days after the legislative session.
Yeah.
I also want to make you all aware, in line with the presentation we just saw, as many of you know, Arizona as a state requires that our legislature approve any Colorado River agreement we sign onto. Given the timeline we have, that will more than likely require a special session down at the legislature, more than likely declared by the governor. The way that would work is the governor would set a very specific criteria for why they are coming down, given X amount of notice, and then it is up to the chambers to gavel in and carry out that special session. But they are only allowed to cover the topic assigned by the governor. All right, next slide. I want to give a federal update while we're here. About a month ago at this point, I went out to EPA headquarters in DC for an SRF roundtable. We had a discussion about struggles with disbursements across the country, hurdles with getting that money out the door. EPA has some thoughts on how the states are doing in terms of getting that money out the door. And I was there to make our perspective clear on how I think it is the other side that is the roadblock, not the states, and getting that money to our borrowers. Also, as you might be aware, currently the SRFs, the drinking water and clean water programs, need federal reauthorization, just similar to a sunset process here in Arizona. There is a version of the reauthorization moving through the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. The verbiage is somewhat similar, but not identical. Both in some way, shape, or form actually expand the scopes of the program. It's just unclear yet on what expansion we're going to receive. So, for example, the Senate version includes language to guarantee certain PFOS coverage. There's one version of the bill that includes wildfire suppression programs within that would now be SRF eligible. So we're just waiting to see what verbiage ultimately makes it to the president. Both versions are moving with overwhelming bipartisan support. So this is going to have to just be sorted out in conference. Now, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Judah?
Thank you, Judah. I did want to bring to the board's attention that there's a tour opportunity that's coming up in the White Mountains, and there'll be 2 WIFA projects that are going to be prominently featured on that tour, Clay Springs and Pinedale Estates DeWitt project. So if you haven't already, you're welcome to attend those. Then also bring to the board's attention that we have started a social media campaign. This is an educational series about our various funds, including the Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund. So like and subscribe.
Thank you for that commercial, Ben. Appreciate that.
We have influencers here.
Agenda item number 6, Director McGuire, Sunset Audit Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into that, I do want to just reiterate the social media campaign is really, really great. The graphics, the messaging that's put together. So if you frequent at all LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, no, we're not on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, that's the other one. Please like, subscribe, share, all of that. Getting that message out really helps. But moving to the sunset audit, as I've told the board before, WIFA is undergoing its periodic sunset audit for the legislature, and we will go before our committee of reference in January 2027. I have not yet been provided with a draft of that audit, but I have been promised it tomorrow. I was also promised it the first week in June, so I'm not holding my breath. However, once I receive that draft, I will be scheduling a meeting to discuss the draft report and WIFA's response to that report. The board leads WIFA, so I want to ensure that you all are in agreement with our response, that we are accurately capturing the message that you want us to relay to the legislature. Because preliminary audit reports are confidential, they need to be discussed by public bodies in executive session. So when we do have it and we do have an opportunity to schedule that, it will be fully in executive session. Brenda sent a polling request yesterday for your availability a week from today, on August 26th. So I know that's a quick turnaround. It is also still pending me actually getting the draft, but we do appreciate you taking the opportunity to take a look at that with us and guide us on it.
Thank you, Director. I
DC.
think Donna.
That's right.
Donna, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Just slipping in a comment, if I may, about Ben's August media messaging, if I may. It's excellent. Really useful tool, and I thank you for making it so clear and a tool that can be effective with folks with whom we visit. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Donna. Are there any questions or comments for Director on the sunset audit report update? Okay, agenda item number 7, Denise Olson, the financial updates.
Thank you. So I just want to run through a couple of different slides. We're going to talk about 2 programs today, the SRF program and also the Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund. So I want to start with our SRF program and with the Forgivable Principal Report. On this report, you've seen it many times, but what we've done is the first column shows you previous balances plus the amounts that we're going to be getting in grants this fiscal year. The next column shows what's on the agenda today. And then the last column shows you the available balances. And that is assuming everything is awarded at this meeting today. So you can see we've got over $115 million for drinking water programs, and we have about $20.5 million for the clean water programs. So use the social media and get the word out that we are open for loans and financial assistance within the state. So if we go to the next slide. Switching topics a tab, I want to give the board an update on this. We have, at the end of the fiscal year, we have to update our loan portfolio, and we want to see what the quality of our portfolio looks like. Again, this is important because our loan repayments are used as a backstop for WIFA's debt. We currently have $81 million of bonds outstanding, and this will be paid off in October of 2027. But this also is our ability for future leveraging. Want to remind the board that we've got 3 categories. We've got qualified pledge loans, and so these are loans that are pledged to pay back our debt. We have qualified not pledged, so this is really our future capacity to leverage. And then we also have not qualified. There's 2 pie charts that we're showing you last year and this year. The goal is to keep the slivers the same, right? So if you see 7% in 2025, you want that to be about 6 to 7% in 2026. But the important part of this is if you look at the pieces that make up the qualified pledge piece and the qualified not pledge piece, you can see most of our portfolio is for highly qualified borrowers. So our strength is very strong when it comes to our SRF funds. Now, the other thing I want you to notice is it does show that the loan portfolio balance in 2025 was $1.1 billion. That does drop to $1 billion this fiscal year. The reason why it drops is because all of our borrowers are paying off their loans. So that's expected. So if we go to the next slide, as they pay off their loans, that does increase our cash balances. So I just wanted to illustrate that even though our portfolio value is decreasing, our cash balances are increasing. Again, it's a signal that we have money available for future loans. Okay, so we need to get out there and get this to revolve. That's the whole purpose of this fund. And then if we go to the next slide, the other characteristic we look at to make sure our portfolio is healthy is who are our top borrowers. This is because if one of our borrowers defaults, we want to make sure we can still pay off our debt. And we have a very healthy balance of our portfolio right now. Our two significant borrowers are Queen Creek and Prescott. However, they're significantly financially stable. So everything is good there. The one thing that I want to stress, though, is although we're looking at qualified borrowers, the whole reason why we do this and we want a healthy portfolio is so we can help our disadvantaged communities, right? So the more flexibility we have in leveraging, the more resources we have to provide financial assistance to our low income or our disadvantaged communities. To date, since our strategic framework was put in place, we have awarded over 100 financial assistance agreements with priority communities. So we're doing well there. So if we go to the next slide, we're strong financially. We've got plenty of resources available for future loans. We did have a surveillance review from Fitch over the summer, and they did maintain our AAA rating. So we're doing very well on this program. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions for the SRF fund.
Any questions for Denise? Pete?
So Denise, as usual, excellent report. In addition to being vice chair, I'm the statewide finance guy. So I think it's incumbent upon me just to kind of comment upon these things. To me, like the bottom line on this seems like things are looking great, right? So the obvious question is there anything that we should be worried about inside of this? What keeps you up at night as far as the SRF programs are concerned? And this will be the same question that I'll have with the other one. Again, I used to ask for the red light, yellow light, green light stuff. That they're green, like really green. Is that accurate? And then also, would you say that to me, it seems like the real message is that we need to just get more applications.
Yes, it would be very nice to have more applications, especially for our, I'll call it the earmarked funds, the PFAS and those programs.
Mm-hmm.
I think as far as what keeps me up at night, we are going to be doing a financial plan in the fall, and we do need to focus on what kind of grant finance or funding we're going to get in the future, right? So we're almost at the end of those bill funds, so we need to see what the impacts are going to be over the next few years. So I'm not worried about it. It's still going to be green lights. But we will see a decrease, most likely, in our federal funds.
Right.
Right.
So if I were to interpret that, it's more like things are great right now. Since things are great right now, maybe I should worry about the long term and to make sure that they continue to be that way. Okay. No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
So next, I thought it was important, if we can go to the next slide, to provide the board a snapshot of where we're at with the long-term water augmentation fund. I want to tell the board that I do owe you a 5-year pro forma, which will have audited financials, will incorporate what we end up doing on our base contracts in terms of negotiating the task, and also some leveraging options. Okay, so this is just a snapshot in time. We started the fiscal year of 26 with about $463 million. We had our budget sweeps that took away $84 million. We then had interest earning. And if you remember, we have kind of two pots of money where we're earning interest. We have the treasurer's pool. We also have our bond proceeds with the bank. So we earned some interest, less the admin cost, what we spent on the base contracts for tax zero. And then if you remember, we also have our in-state loan program with Queen Creek, which we have a $90 million loan. So we made a disbursement. So that leaves us with a balance of about $300 million. So if you go to the next slide. So we start off with the $300 million. This is where, again, we need to do a more detailed analysis of what the interest earnings are going to be in the treasurer's pool and the bond proceeds. These are my guess at this point. Then we also have our admin cost. Again, if you remember, this matches the budget that you all approved in August or July. We are estimating the base contracts to be about $30 million. We'll revise this number as you approve each of the base contracts and the task orders. And then we have our debt service payments with the bank. And I put a 0 for our in-state loan program as a placeholder. That would leave us with a minimum amount of financial resources of about $269 million. Now, again, when we do the pro forma, I hope to optimize this pot of money and find ways to grow it. So we can figure that out with a leveraging program, but this is kind of a minimum amount just to give you some numbers before you go into future agenda items. Is there any questions on that?
Any questions from the board for Denise?
I do just want to not clarify, but to add to Denise's point, the 0 on the in-state loan program is a placeholder. You have asked us to come back to you with a plan, to Denise's point, about how we can best leverage the money that we have for both the importation projects, but also for potentially more immediate projects in state. We won't know the answer to that question until you make some of the decisions that are on the agenda today, and then we'll be on future agendas as well regarding the base contracts. So there's a little bit of we don't know what we have until we know what we have, which is why we haven't brought that plan to you yet. The 0 here does not signal that we do not plan to have an in-state loan program, additional awards made under that program this year. It just shows that we don't know yet what they're going to be.
Pete?
Hi again. The same question, right? What keeps you up at night about this stuff just from a finance perspective? It seems like it's still great.
I think it's going to be very important for us to do a 5-year plan and really talk about what that looks like and shape the in-state program along with how we're going to be handling the base contracts. So we need to put a plan in place, and we will definitely bring that back to the board.
Yeah. The 0 on the in-state loan program definitely raised my eyebrows a bit. I'm glad that the clarifying point was made. To me, given the stark differences between hey, everything's green in terms of the money that we have to spend, and then the grim, essentially 0 quote that we got out of the CAP representative that was just here. I think it's pretty obvious to me, at least, that it's a pain in the butt to move water from out of state to in state. For in state, if we can spend the money on that, that seems to be a lot faster and a lot more meaningful to today's challenges. So I would expect that number to move. Do you agree? Well,
It'll be up to the board. Again, I think that's you need to do a thorough analysis and provide you with some options. Again, we don't show any kind of SRF activity on what I'm showing you today. This is just where we're at this moment. So when we add kind of a concept of what an in-state SRF program could look like, it's going to change this picture and possibly add future resources for whatever the board decides to do.
But even absent like additional funds, with the funds we've got right now, we could do something.
Yeah, $268.8 million.
Thank you.
It's not very much, Pete.
Well, if you're giving it away.
Investing. All right, Denise, anything else?
That's it. Thank
Pete,
you.
any more questions? No. All right. We're going to the consent agenda announcement. Agenda items 8, 9A, 9B, 10A through K through 10K are noticed as consent agenda items and will be considered as a group and acted upon by one motion with no separate discussion unless otherwise requested by a board member. A reminder to those attending virtually, please ensure that you are unmuted for our vote. And I want to note that a board member has requested to pull 10H from Sun Valley Farms for individual consideration. Are there any other requests to pull items from the consent agenda at this time? We got.
Chairman, this is Sue Montgomery.
Hey, Sue.
Thank you. I'm going to need to abstain from the vote for the Yavapai Apache Nation, which is 10E. And so I don't know if we need to pull that separately for that purpose.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sue. 10H and 10C. Right, Ben?
I think it's E, Mr. Chairman.
E is an echo.
E for you, Sue. We have a comment on 10C, and then we've already had a request to pull 10H.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Sue. I would entertain a motion on the remaining agenda items, excluding 10E, 10H, and 10C at this time.
Mr. Chair, this is Tim. I would move the listed items with the exclusions listed for approval for the consent agenda.
Thank you, Tim. I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman.
We have two. Let's see. Donna, you spoke first, I believe.
Well, I'll say I did.
All right. And you have the last word. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional board member discussion? No further discussion. We will call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. We will go back to 10E. I say we'll go to 10C first. City of San Luis. Who would like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have Miguel Ramirez with the City of San Luis. Miguel, you can go ahead and address the board. Miguel?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Miguel.
I'm just here for the city to ask any question that you may have, and that's it.
Does the board have any questions for Miguel from the City of San Luis regarding items 10C? That's loan resolution 2027-003, City of San Luis for $12,150,000. If not, I would entertain a motion at this time. For item 10C.
Mr. Chairman, this is Supervisor Miller, or Member Miller. I'll make the motion as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Do we have a second?
Patrice Horseman, second.
Thank you, Patrice. The supervisors are active. We have a motion and a second. Is there any board member discussion? No further discussion. We will call for a vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you for Miguel for being here with us today. 10E. Yes, 10E. Yavapai Apache Nation C. Let's see. Loan resolution 2027-005 for $7 million.
And Mr. Chairman, we are happy to present this. Lindsay, if you would like, and then you can ask any questions of staff. Yep. And I do believe we pulled this off as one member had to abstain, but happy to answer any questions. So just a brief summary, they are requesting $7 million. $3.5 million is recommended as loan forgiveness. This would be the second phase of the nation's request to install a Middle Verde water reclamation facility. It'd be a new system which would help to provide sustainable treatment methods to improve overall health and sanitation and security for the nation. There's no managerial, technical, or legal findings identified by staff, and we should have applicant representatives available if there's any questions.
Are there any questions from the board? Any member discussion?
I'd make a motion to go ahead and to approve item E on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Patrice. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Donna. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Mr. Chairman, Sue Montgomery abstain.
Thank you, Sue. Motion carries. Item 10H. Do we have a specific question? Do we need an explanation? What was the reason for being pulled?
Let's allow staff to present, and then the board can ask questions of staff, and I believe we also have the applicant available.
All right. Scott.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Lyons. This request is a little complicated, so a little bit of background on it. Sun Valley Farms had a prior application presented to the FPC in February of this year for the same project, and the committee recommended its approval to the board. However, Sun Valley Farms missed its payment in January of 2026 on the existing loan that it had. And that also financially is part of the same project. So WIFA thought it was appropriate to pull it from board agenda for that February meeting so they can investigate the situation and come back at a later time. Just note all payments are current right now, and the due diligence analysis has been updated based on the information that we pulled from talking to the applicant and looking at additional reports. The project is to rehabilitate a single well to address nitrate contamination and structural failures that have forced the system to rely on purchasing water. The proposed project will install a new steel liner case to seal the contaminated water and add a new storage tank, both with the intention of restoring the well as the primary supply for the company and but they will also keep the Queen Creek interconnection available for backup and blending purposes. Sun Valley Farms, however, is not in compliance with the Arizona Department of Water Resources annual reporting requirements. And WIFA did add this as a condition before the loan can be executed that they are in compliance. Also, the Arizona Corporation Commission has expressed concern in several decisions on the system's management, and in June 2024 decision, it included a potential consideration in the future if things are not approved for a show cause. Historical performance has been mixed since the 2021 WIFA loan was approved. Primary cost factors being the purchased water, which they are getting from Queen Creek, the purchased power and to fund that and to supply that, and the maintenance expenses, which have impacted performance. Elimination of a prior loan surcharge in June of 2024 in the ACC decision approving this loan did contribute to the delinquent payment in January of 2026, but as stated, all payments are now current. However, the balance sheet is in weak with limited asset liquidity. The ACC also, as mentioned, did approve in their decision, a new loan where they would cover the principal and interest and the debt service charge components so they can bill those to their customers, and also implemented a purchased water adjustment mechanism, which would basically pass through the cost of any purchased water to the borrowers. And they use that route so that once things get going into this well supplying, then they can discontinue that purchase mechanism. So based on all that information and putting together the new due diligence, they do meet the required 1.2 times debt service coverage projected, but it is, again, into some thin margins. The financial finding, the current debt authority provided by the ACC did expire on June 20th, 2026, and will require amendment and restatement before closing this loan. So that's a brief overview. I will open it up for any questions from that.
Are there any questions from the board? Donna and then Ted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very basic. Are we moving in the right direction? It would appear so, but I'd like some affirmation to that effect, that the concerns have been adequately addressed regarding financial capability. It looks like, they're on the right road with gaining capacity to manage this project. But can we get any more detail that would assure us that this applicant is a good risk, or that risk is lessening?
Thank you, Donna. Ted.
Well,
yeah.
Okay.
But I just wondered what Ted was going to add to that.
Yeah, it might be able to be included in the same response because it's along the same lines as we just heard. I'm not sure that the financial capability necessarily has been improved. When you read this report, we see that this entity did not provide any financial information to WIFA as far as either financial statements or budget. And all of the estimates are based on the staff's work, the WIFA staff's estimates based on whatever historical information that they could lay their hands on. We've got, as listed on the slide that we're looking at right now, apparently some kind of pending action with the ACC as far as management effectiveness, the permit for this entity to borrow money that was at one time granted by ACC. I didn't see when that was granted, but it's expired since then. And the write-up that we have says, well, the ACC would be willing to consider reinstating that permit if the WIFA board approves this loan. Also, this entity is out of compliance with water use reports to ADWR, but I guess has promised to clear that up once we consider this loan. To me, this is all backwards. Because a borrower has to have their affairs in order before they come to us, not after they come to us. And these other things that they need to do are conditions that need to be satisfied before we'll actually disperse money. And the three things that need to be rectified are some kind of improvement in the management position. Whoever failed to make the January payment, why, if that was not having the sufficient funds to do that, or just an oversight on the part of management, neither one of those are a good explanation. It cannot happen again. And if it's the same folks, I'm not sure that that's acceptable to me. The second one is getting up to date with the mandatory reporting requirements of ADWR. And the third one is to clear the air with the ACC as far as any concerns that they have. This is their job to manage those utilities as an enterprise, not ours. And so those three things, I think, need to be cleared up before we even consider this loan. Now, I'm well aware, and I should say this, of the need, because this project is out of compliance with ADEQ and things like that. This needs to be addressed. But things need to go in a particular order, and this doesn't represent the order that makes sense to me.
It's for that reason, and just as a follow-up to my initial question, and thank you for your in-depth explanation. What it does is lessen my confidence that we should be in the business as WIFA of betting on the come, as they would say at the racetrack. I'm worried about doing so until we have confidence that we have a reliable applicant. And there is nothing on this that gives me that confidence.
Thank you, Donna. We're going to go to Scott, and then we're going to go Sue. I see you have your hand up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple ways I think I want to, with your approval, maybe address this. One is to give you some of our analysis that went into this that might answer some of those questions. But then I think we should have the owner, Jimmy Harris, calling in directly, and the engineer, Alan Converse, and maybe they could provide some of that other information that you are requesting, or at least supplement what I'm saying. The first one I wanted to comment on is the association with the ACC. I mean, the ACC did review the project. They did provide financing recommendations. It was unfortunately back in 2021, we were just getting out of COVID and costs did go up. So there were additional costs. So that was part of the reason they're coming back for additional money, because they couldn't just get what they were done. The ACC comment about a show cause is not imminent. I don't think, Mr. Cook. I think they just made a comment in their decision that they had several things like late reports and stuff that they want to see better management performance, or they may have to take that route. I don't think it's imminent, but it was stated in their documentation. As far as the financing that we reviewed, there's a couple of things that were noticed. One being the last couple of years, they did hire an outside contractor that was very expensive, and that did significantly costs. It was like $60,000, and based on their level of income. It was just a significant amount, especially with that cut that took place in July of 2024 when the ACC issued the decision for this new loan and putting in the purchase water mechanism. They cut the surcharge for this loan, so that impacted it. And I believe, when I read the decision, they were showing that the WIFA loan had an outstanding continuing obligation of about $5,500 when it's actually more about $17,000. So I think there's a disconnect there, which is one of the things we want to make sure that we go back to the ACC, or the borrower goes back to the ACC and has a rate study done. So that's kind of some of the items I look at, but just scaling back, that large expense tied mainly to that provider that we're providing the management type services. They're doing it now at a much lower cost, and we still put an elevated cost in there, but it was much less than the 60,000. And that, again, there's mostly flexibility in that. I understand that, as you mentioned, we did receive preliminary 2026 income and balance sheet from the borrower. It wasn't what was submitted to the ACC at that time, so it's still subject. Like you said, they hadn't filed the 2025 report yet, but we did at least have some figures, and using that figures we came up with like you said, using some educated guesses, some trends, came up with a situation where it looked like they could do it, especially if the ACC is funding the second loan with the principal interest and the surcharge. The other thing that was taken into consideration is that with the first loan, which is really our concern loan at this moment, the debt service reserve fund, which is 1 year of payments, has been fully funded. WIFA holds that amount. So we always have right now a year of funding available for things to get reconciled. That's probably where I think I want to lead off right there, and maybe go to the borrower for some of your other questions. I'll be glad to, if you have a response or rebuttal to any of the questions or answers, I go back and respond to those.
Thank you, Scott. We'll go to Sue.
Thank you. I wanted to circle back to something Mr. Cook said, because this was troubling me, which is the operation, the management situation. You said earlier that the outside contractor that was helping to manage was expensive, Scott, I think you said, but that it's significantly expensive for the outside contractor. But there's a newer one on board. Perhaps the owner can speak to the management, because it goes to what Ted said, which is that, if the same people are there doing this, we're going to do the same things. I would be concerned about the same mistakes moving forward. So could someone speak to the operational capacity a little more than what we've heard so far? Perhaps Mr. Harris.
Jimmy, you're welcome to speak. Go ahead, Jim.
Can we admit him?
He is admitted and his mic is unmuted. So Jim, I don't know if maybe it's an issue on your end, making sure that your device is picking up on whatever microphone you're using, but we currently cannot hear you. Did you say the engineer was also on the line? Yeah, if you could give Alan.
In the meantime, Donna or Ted, did you have any follow-up questions?
Well, my follow-up.
Not yet.
My follow-up remains the same as my initial, that I'm not seeing the capacity to go forward successfully unless the questions that have already been asked regarding operation, leadership or / management have been rectified. And the outstanding question about the ACC is has to be answered. I think we've got the cart before the horse here, in other words. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Were we able to connect?
Alan or Jim, are you able to speak in?
I'm available. This is Alan.
I don't know, for the board, and Alan, as the engineer, may not be able to answer some of the managerial questions that you had. So Alan, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I do want to remind the board that you have some leeway here on this application to either table it until satisfactory information can be provided, right? If they're based on the questions that you've asked here, we can go back to the applicant and ask them for some of those. You can also condition the approval of this loan on assurances, right? Whatever assurances that you deem necessary to ensure that that financial assistance is the wise move. We can add those into the resolution as well. So if it feels like you're not going to have your questions answered here today, there are some options for you.
The only one thing I would like to add to that
Scott,
as well. Oh, sorry.
Can you speak up?
I can. Is that better? Hello?
A little bit, that's better.
Okay. I'll just wanted to also mention that, before we can even close this loan, that the ACC is going to have to give us this approval to extend their debt authority. So I've never been part of 40. I remember they want to use all their extension process. But I would assume that they would look at that as well. But I just want to point that out, that there is a requirement that we still need to get the true debt authority approved and active by the ACC before we can continue with this loan. And we could put that in the resolution. It's default, but we could specifically some of if we need to.
If the board doesn't object, I think I'll table this at this time.
Do you want to tell us, Mr. Chairman, table it until a particular milestone has been met or a particular date? What would be the preference of the board?
Probably to have all of our questions answered with the assurances. I understand that needs to go before the ACC, and perhaps the applicant could present himself next time to be able to have a discussion. I think that's having him here would probably be a good thing in order to reassure the board that we're heading in the right direction.
Do you want to wait to bring it back until it's gone to the ACC? And I'm looking to Denise and Scott as to whether that's a practical option.
When do you anticipate going to the ACC?
I think it's kind of the ACC is kind of waiting our reaction. We're kind of waiting on the ACC reaction. So we could definitely present it to them and give it a response back from them.
And perhaps we could invite the applicant to be present in person for the next discussion.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you. It is 10:07. We're going to recess until 10:25.
You want that long?
10:07, 15.
It's 18 minutes.
18 minutes
Okay.
instead of 15 minutes.
That works.
Call it an even on the 5. Wouldn't you want to spend? 18 minutes.
God, I can get my hair done. That's great. So much time. Thank you.
You're looking good. You're looking good.
Come back, Donna.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We will reconvene and I will take attendance. And are we still recording? Thank you very much. Ted Cook? Here. Patrice Horseman?
Present.
Drew John? Here. Pete Kim? Here. Donna Michaels?
Here.
Stephen Miller? He's on. Sue Montgomery?
I'm here. I'm here.
Tim Tamir?
Here.
And Jonathan Lyons. Thank you very much. Non-voting members, Elizabeth Alvarado Thorson. Tom Bushotsky.
Lady Maker for Director Bushotsky.
Gail Griffin. Lauren Kuby. Karen Peters. Here. Robin Said. TJ Shope. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. And Sandra Watson.
I will note for the record, Mr. Chair, that Representative Griffin is on and just not unmuted.
Thank you, Representative Griffin, for being here with us today. We will open the regular agenda and begin consideration for the items for the regular agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak on the specific item on the regular agenda may request to speak prior to the chairman opening up discussion on that item. For instructions on how to submit a speaker card, please refer to the notes on the proceedings at the end of the meeting agenda. But before we go to that, Ben, did we have somebody on the line that wished to address the board?
Mr. Chairman, here in person is the city manager of Wilcox, Caleb Bashke. We'll invite him up.
Here in person, even better. Thank you for being here in person.
Thank you.
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Caleb Bloschke. I'm the city manager of Wilcox. We're at the League of Arizona Cities and Towns Conference just right down the road, and I saw there was a WIFA board meeting, and I just really wanted to come here and report back to the board and say thank you, and to say thank you to the WIFA staff. Wilcox has been the recipient of multiple grants over the last several years, approximately 8 to 9 million, I believe, through water conservation funds, through the revolving loan funds. And we've been really able to improve our infrastructure and update our system. I specifically also wanted to just thank Amanda, Evan, and Casey, Lindsay, and Chelsea, and a lot of other WIFA staff members that have been working with us. All these conservation funds, I've always told people getting grants is a lot easier than managing grants, especially as a rural community, following procurement rules, not only with state, rules, federal rules, and then not having project managers on hand. Those are extra duties you now have to figure out. And then you don't have asset management systems. You don't have work order systems. So now you have to try to track all of your staff's time because you're lacking funding. And it is a mess. It is a really big mess. And I know Wilcox isn't the only community that goes through that. And so I know how much they've been working with us. And I hope they've been working with other communities too, because I feel bad that we need to get more of our stuff together. But I did want to just highlight two specific projects. Well, we've been able to convert all of our parks into smart irrigation systems, and we've been able to remove a significant amount of turf at all of our parks and install rock and other landscaping, drought tolerant landscaping. We've been able to reduce the overall footprint of our cemetery and remove quite a bit of grass and turf from our cemetery. That was a bit of a fight, but now our community loves it. It's beautiful. It looks nice. It's clean. We've been able to install a new SCADA system on our well pumps, and we've been able to make some critical well repairs. And I'll tell you why we're grateful for one of these. For the first time in over 25 years, we had a big storm hit Wilcox, a microburst, and it took out 60 power lines, and they were all around our well site, which is over 5 miles from our city. And so our well was without power to feed over 4,000 residents and businesses. And APCO came with a generator. We were able to hook up a generator to it. But we were able to get WIFA funds a couple of years ago, and we've been doing these studies identifying a new well site within the city of Wilcox. And that's going to be able to provide our residents water closer to where when these incidents happen, we'll have another well site. And so I think that's great. And I just want to really give a shout out to the board and express how much these funds mean to rural Arizona. We don't have a lot of funds. Our residents are low income typically. And so without WIFA funds, we wouldn't be able to do these important projects. We did a rate study and increased our water rates to help pay for some of the additional projects we're trying to do. And the consultant represents a lot of other cities in Arizona. And he shared that almost 40% of Arizona's rural water systems they don't charge enough just to maintain operations. That's a scary statistic. And so I've always said to WIFA in the past, I'm like, one of the things I've always thought would be a great condition for receiving funds is to do a rate study, because then it makes them comply with some of those things. But just the one other thing I wanted to share very quickly is we received funding to look at doing a rural water district and how to expand our own water resources. And this has been very educational because we're in a new AMA and there's certain laws that exist there now where we have our surface area water rights, and how do we now serve residents whose wells are going dry around us? And so we were able to hire an engineer and start designing these satellite sites. And now we're working with some different groups, water districts and other entities, where we can put these water satellite sites to where people will have water filling stations, and then we'll start to expand from there instead of having a $100 million rural water district that doesn't really make sense. So we're really exploring some of these things. And again, we wouldn't be able to do these things without the help of WIFA. So we appreciate all you guys have done for us, and thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate that. And for reporting publicly. It's even better. We will go to agenda item number 11, long-term augmentation fund water importation projects. And we will move agenda items 11A and 11B to review, discuss, and possibly act on long-term water augmentation project scope of work. Director McGuire, we will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, today you have an opportunity to take a very important next step in our long-term augmentation mission by approving scopes of work for the first stage of 2 projects, the EPCOR groundwater storage and the EPCOR water reuse projects. If approved, the work that you authorize today will help you better understand potential costs, infrastructure needs, water delivery and purchase considerations, community impact, and the overall viability of the projects before you. But before we launch into that discussion, I'm going to take a quick step back, as we've done a few times over the last few months, and just sort of remind new board members and previous and legacy board members, I guess I'll say, on not just what the process is that we're going through, but why we chose that process in the first place. So Ben, if you could go to the next slide, let's start with a level setting on actually WIFA's existential purpose, why we exist in the first place. When our new programs were created, the legislature expressed its intent for WIFA by saying that it was our role to lead a comprehensive water strategy. What does that mean? It means a walk and chew gum at the same time approach that embraces conservation, efficiency, reuse, and augmentation projects. And to fill that augmentation role, we have a long-term augmentation fund. And that fund is mandated to focus on importation options. As the statute says, bringing water supply or funding water supply development projects that import water from outside of the boundaries of the state. But how should we do that? When should we do that? Where should we do that? The statute is conveniently silent on those issues. Instead, it relied on you, our diverse and very experienced board of directors, to make both those practical decisions and those policy decisions about how to implement our mandate. And you, as the board, chose to do that through a competitive solicitation that was intended to identify projects or a project portfolio that can bring as much as 500,000 acre feet of water per year into the state in the time frame of the next 10 to 15 years. Again, we're called the Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund. So then if you can go to the next slide, it is the results of that solicitation that you're analyzing and potentially advancing here today. We crafted that solicitation to be consistent with finding projects that meet our needs, namely up to 500,000 acre feet of water per year, and our purpose, which is to work collaboratively with the public and private sectors to show a benefit to the economy and the environment through these projects. So Ben, if you can go to the next slide. Why did we choose that? Why is this the process that the board undertook? Why didn't we just, to put it in maybe colloquial terms, why didn't you just go out and build something? There's a lot of reasons. And first of all, I want to apologize if this slide invokes any trauma responses in those of you who were there for these initial discussions. Jonathan's laughing because I think that is absolutely true. But these slides and these river charts and the multiple aspects of everything, they're very illustrative of the discussions that we were having and the multiple considerations that WIFA had and still has and is still trying to balance as we fulfill that long-term augmentation mandate. We're thinking about cost drivers. We're thinking about feasibility. We're thinking about NEPA permitting, community acceptance. So how do we take all of those considerations and figure out the project that fits the best? Or even, is there a project that fits, right? That was an open question for a very long time. And what we heard from you all from the board very clearly was that you didn't know if there were projects that existed to meet these criteria. And we also heard that you in and of yourselves could not design or develop these projects that fit those criteria and met all of those needs. So instead, we needed to figure out a way for the private sector, who are the true experts in this field, to help us find the answers to the question of, does such a project exist? And if so, what is it? So that's why the solicitation exists. Throughout 2024, you wrote the solicitation. You asked private sector players to do two things. You asked them to put together a fully formed team of engineers and construction managers and financing and PR professionals who could lead the development of these water infrastructure projects. And then you asked that team, once it was put together, what's your best idea? What are the things that we believe are going to be here to build and import significant volumes of water? And they gave you 7 real-world value-added project proposals to do what we've asked them to do, which is importing hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water into the state over the next 10 to 15 years. So next slide, please, Ben. What we're doing today is taking 2 of those project ideas and furthering the work that we're doing to do our due diligence as they become further developed. So instead of just being asked to accept kind of a sales pitch or a project proposal at face value, WIFA is contracting with these teams so that we can develop these ideas arm in arm. It allows us to do community outreach while we're doing engineering, while we're talking about offtake discussions. And it actually allows us to meaningfully assess alternatives in parallel without sort of a preconceived notion in mind. We've described it a few times as a NEPA in its purest form. You're really setting us up very well to navigate that critical permitting process by truly having alternatives to put before whoever the ultimate entity is that's determining that. And it also, as you'll see today, it allows us to move projects as they're ready. You're seeing 2 of the 7. That is not a value statement on the other 5 that you're not seeing. It's just because these 2 are ready to go. And we're going to move as projects are ready. One project does not delay another project. We can go in parallel. We can work in parallel to help you make decisions as you're ready to make them. In essence, though, when you look at this process, you might think of it as sort of going out of order as how we would normally develop a project. Because if your starting point is a project and you know this is the thing we want to build and this is where we want to build it, all this work I'm talking about is actually work that you do later, right? You have the thing and you say, buyers, I hope you like it. Community, I hope you figure out a way to get on board with it because this is what it's going to be. We're actually doing it backward. We're doing all that first. And we're saying, buyers, what do you want? Communities, what can you accept? How do we work collaboratively and methodically so that we actually are building that acceptance and we are building the value of that project in parallel so that we do it right, right? And it's also really critical because we're doing all of that work out in public. If you're doing it backwards and you sort of have a project, that project development typically is going to happen in a very shielded manner. The public is not going to have a lot of input there. There's not a lot of transparency. We're doing it all backwards for the purposes of being collaborative, being transparent, and it might feel clunky, but clunky is good in this situation, right? That's how we get to a better result. So why didn't we just ask for a project? I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, but first of all, we didn't know what we wanted. You all didn't know what project to ask for. And even if you had known, it's pretty unlikely that a private party would have done all the work to get a project selection ready without the guarantee of a contract at the end of the day. So I don't think a procurement would have been all that successful. Had we just selected a project, we would have run the risk or maybe even the certainty of straining relationships with our stakeholders and our partners across the board, because selecting a project is a preconceived notion of what's best. And rightfully, that could probably anger the communities where that project was proposed to be located if they were not consulted, if we didn't care about the environmental impacts of the projects, if we didn't care about the folks that have to convince their city councils to pay for the water that comes from those projects and everybody in between. Preconceived notions and determining things before all those conversations happen does not set you up for success. And the other reason I think really is that selecting a project is really putting all of our eggs in one basket. Because if that one project becomes untenable for whatever reason, our alternative is to then start from the drawing board. And I don't think we have that luxury here at WIFA. You've seen the headlines. You heard what Mr. Dent had to say earlier. The state has proven that it doesn't really want to keep its commitment to our financial resources. We only get one shot at doing this right. So we don't have the luxury of false starts, of stopping and starting over. So we have to identify and we have to assess multiple options in parallel. All of this is rationale for why you did what you did. So why am I telling you all this? We're all living in a state of urgency right now. We see headlines, we hear presentations, and it's undeniable that Arizona has some very immediate, very pronounced water needs. And it would be really easy to look at what we're doing and have the temptation to think, man, I wish we could just pick a project and go with it. I've fallen into that trap a few times. So I want to share with you 2 examples that have helped me out of that trap and really helped, I think, underscore the wisdom of what this board has done and continues to do. So Ben, if you can go to the next slide, it's a tale of 2 projects. Y'all are familiar with the Carlsbad project, right? A lot of you have been there, you've toured it. Let's talk a little bit about the timeline. The first conception of this project was floated in 1998, but rather than diving into this is good, let's do it, the proponents took a really methodical approach. After 2 years of desalination studies, followed 3 years of the environmental review process. And then once that was done, there were 2 or 3 years of stakeholder outreach so we could get the community and policymakers on board. 3 years after that, there was a financing and purchase agreement. And finally, 17 years from the idea that it first emerged, water was flowing. 17 years. I'm sure there were times along the way when the proponents of that project were thinking, why is it not going faster? Why can't we do this faster? But because they chose to take the route that we did, this is a highly successful project. It's producing excess water that they would like folks in Arizona to buy, right? It is the right way to do a project. Now, let's contrast it with a more recent example from our friends in Texas. In 2019, the Corpus Christi City Council greenlit a desalination project on the coast there. Soon after, they issued an RFP, similar to our solicitation, but a little more closed. And that RFP closed in 2024. I'm just going to take a side rail here and note that they knew what project they wanted and where it needed to be, and their solicitation took 5 years, and ours took 1. So just, highlight there, not for nothing. But by 2025, they'd completely abandoned the project. Why? Cost estimates went from $160 million to $1.2 billion. A vocal sector of the public came out swinging real hard against it. Please do not have any arrests at this public meeting. You all have been very, very good so far. I don't anticipate that. And so I would say because there was a priority for urgency over being methodic, there were like 6 years of work wasted and they're back at square one, right? Maybe they haven't abandoned it entirely, but all of this work that went into it, it's no longer there. And now it's a cautionary tale. So 3 years ago, WIFA made the thoughtful decision not to be a cautionary tale, to prioritize thoughtfulness over expediency. It was the right decision then, and it remains the right decision now. So if you can go to the next slide. Again, I think there are folks asking WIFA right now, and I know we're asking ourselves, where's the result? What's taking so long? What are we doing? And the answer is, and it has to continue to be, that when we're given the choice between doing this right and doing this fast, we're going to do it right. Does that mean we can't also find time and resources to address immediate needs? To Mr. Kim's question earlier, it certainly doesn't. We've done that with our in-state program. We look to continue to doing that through our in-state program and all of our other really impactful funding issues and funding systems. But we're going to keep our eyes on the prize, which is the long-term project, the thing that only WIFA is capable of doing, that only WIFA is proposed and is poised to do. And we're going to get through that long-term project with community acceptance multiple benefits for every community it touches, and to bring renewable water into the state. So I think next and final slide of my pontification here, and my mic just died, so it's still yours. Thank you. So all of that to lead, where are we today? What are we doing? As I said, you've got in front of you 2 scopes for projects. These scopes are highly negotiated. Getting the technical work appropriately scoped while also making sure the budget was something that we were comfortable bringing to you. That was no small task. And I think our friends will attest that they've got a lot more gray hair now than they did when we started this process. And so we really appreciate their partnership and their patience. And today you'll see the results of that really complex negotiation. In the meantime, we've also engaged a group of about a dozen potential water purchasers who've been extremely active, very willing to work with us, and very willing to go to bat for us publicly, which has been fantastic to say, you know, WIFA is our future. We're willing to work with them and figure out what agreements look like for future projects. We spent all summer and are continuing into the fall to have conversations with stakeholders, potential exchange partners, regulatory agencies, everyone in between, to really daylight our process. Our development teams have been with us in many of those conversations, and it's helped us make sure that everybody understands what WIFA is doing, what WIFA is not doing, and really define the preferred level and the preferred method of engagement for some of these stakeholder partners. And last but not least, we've been tailoring a refreshed and renewed needs assessment, which many of you, we talked about earlier this year, you authorized us to do. And that will directly inform the work that we're scoping here today. So we're making sure that that needs assessment is tailored to inform this work effectively so that you all can make decisions based on real demand, real purchasing power, and real information from the teams. So getting here obviously was no small task, and getting these scopes right is critical to the continued march toward identifying and vetting and constructing a project. But I urge you all today to keep your eyes on the prize. Give yourselves credit for the road that you embarked on and the wisdom of the process that you created. Embrace the progress that we are making, and don't forget the ultimate goal, which you all have identified for us, which is a thriving Arizona where water is secure. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I think in your script you have the ability to call up the teams from here, but I am happy to answer any questions from the board before we launch into the actual presentations.
Do we have any questions from the board for Director McGuire at this time? I think we're anxious to hear presentations, right?
You should be.
Okay. And we'd like to avoid any arrests, so.
Yes, please.
I thought that was spring. Anyway, all right. I'd like to call up EPCOR Water Innovation. I know. Everybody just wants to get on with it. I'd like to call up EPCOR Water Innovation Partners Groundwater Project Team for a presentation to the board. As they make their way up, I'll remind them that we have 20 minutes slated for this presentation, followed for a time for question and answers with the board. I will keep time.
There you go.
Good morning, and thank you, Director McGuire. I think you set the table really nicely and discussed kind of what we've done to get to where we're at today. So thank you for that. My name is Kirsty Craig. I am the development lead on behalf of EPCOR and the broader EPCOR Water Innovation Partners team. I'm joined here by Sujan Panyurutha with Stantec, who is our design manager for the groundwater project. Again, thank you for the opportunity to walk through our proposed appraisal approach for this project, and our focus will be on how the appraisal approach is structured to identify viable projects, address key risks, understand cost drivers, and ultimately support informed investment decisions by WIFA. We have a lot of information to cover, so I'll briefly cover each slide and want to save time at the end for questions. But I'll pass it to Sujan now, who will summarize the WIFA itself.
Thank you, Christy. I'm dealing with some allergies. I apologize for the hoarse voice here. So starting off, if we can go to the next slide. So I'll highlight the major elements of this WIP. This WIP is based on capturing excess flow from the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers and accessing that excess flow through the California State Water Project, which is essentially a series of canal system that flows through the central part of California. Another key element of this WIP is it's based on paper exchange agreement between California and Arizona on Colorado River allocations. And then through stage one,
we'll go through a series of screening process. And our goal is to identify 3 groundwater projects with an estimated yield of over 100,000 acre foot per year. And given that these are groundwater projects, we anticipate the time to get the projects running to be between 5 to 10 years. And another key element of this WIP is to have a willing exchange partner in California with allocations, with Colorado River allocations. So talking about that a little bit more, if you can go to the next slide. So there are 2 entities here that we like to talk about in terms of the operating mechanism. One is the California entity, and second would be the groundwater bank manager, or the owner of the groundwater project. So the mechanism, the way it works is the California entity will take the excess supply coming through the state water project and then work with the groundwater bank manager to store the water during wet season or high flow seasons. And then during periods when there's less water available, the California entity will work with the groundwater bank manager to extract some of the water for their use. So because they are increasing the resiliency and they're getting excess water, there's going to be an exchange mechanism with Arizona to share allocations of the Colorado River with Arizona. So pretty simple in the process, but obviously pretty complex when we go through the detailed exchange agreements. If you can go to the next slide. This is more of a flow chart of how the process works. I'll highlight 2 elements here in the interest of time. One is, as the California entity stores water in the groundwater storage and recovery facility, there are requirements, both regulatory and also through exchange agreements, to leave behind a portion of the water for the local groundwater entity. And that's why there is a win-win solution here. There is a positive value for the local groundwater banking entity to get some water that's stored during these excess flows. And then after we consider the leave behind, that additional water is used by the exchange entity to serve their purpose and also have an agreement with Arizona to share the Colorado River allocations. Now, the second element of this is because of these series of agreements, the actual amount of water ending up with the off-takers in Arizona can be lower than what's stored in the groundwater banking entity. So through the process, we will make sure that there is sufficient volume of water to make this project viable, and the amount of water finally being received by the off-takers in Arizona is significant enough to make the project viable. Right. If you go to the next slide, there are several stakeholders here. As Director McGuire has indicated, the key part of the success of the project will depend on how well we collaborate. And thanks to Director McGuire and her team, we were able to meet with several of these exchange entities and regulators. And so it was a very initial meeting, but the initial meetings have been generally positive. And as we move forward, obviously there are going to be a series of additional meetings with local agencies and these entities. We can go to the next slide. Major infrastructure elements. Obviously, the most significant element is having a groundwater recharge basin with the appropriate hydrogeologic structure to store water. And to be honest, the infrastructure for groundwater storage and recovery is probably one of the more simpler of the process. It's more of the agreements. Typical infrastructure elements include diversion structures, conveyance, canals, pipelines, pump stations, and recovery wells. That I'll hand it back to Christy to talk about risk.
Thanks, Sujan. So the next section here will focus on what we believe to be the top 5 risks to the WIP. So the ones that we believe to be the top 5 risks here that could potentially impact overall project feasibility include Securing willing project partners, accessing the conveyance infrastructure that's existing, hydrogeologic performance, regulatory constraints, and environmental permitting requirements. But the stage appraisal process has really been structured to specifically evaluate and reduce uncertainty in each of these areas. We'll go into each risk in a bit more detail. So the first and arguably most important risk that we've heard earlier in the meeting here is securing a willing California exchange partner, which Sujan again has alluded to in his slides. Without the right structure, the broader concept cannot move forward. As a result, stakeholder engagement, commercial discussions, and framework development are embedded in each of the 3 appraisal stages. The second risk here is conveyance capacity. Even if the water is available and partners are identified, the infrastructure must be capable of moving water where it needs to go. The stage work will identify potential topographical or location constraints and infrastructure upgrades so that they can be factored into overall project viability and cost. The next risk is hydrogeologic limitations. Groundwater banking does depend on local aquifer characteristics. This risk focuses on whether recharge, storage, and recovery can perform at the levels required due to the subsurface conditions in those areas. To address this risk, we'll be focusing our technical studies and groundwater modeling to become increasingly detailed as projects advance through the appraisal stages. Next, in terms of regulatory restrictions, this could involve water rights, groundwater sustainability requirements, as well as basin-specific regulations, all which could influence project feasibility. This is particularly important in terms of how much water can be recovered at each location. A key objective of our study will be to identify compliance pathways and develop plans to navigate regulatory requirements, particularly in tasks 2 and 3. And then lastly, we note permitting constraints as a key risk on many projects. Environmental review and permitting timelines can significantly impact project schedules and costs. For instance, we will need to be developing a roadmap to navigate the CEQA and possibly NEPA processes. The appraisal studies are designed to identify fatal flaws early, establish permitting pathways, and understand mitigation requirements before advanced project development can occur. The next section here will highlight the primary drivers that will influence the ultimate cost of water for the WIP. At a high level, the water costs are expected to be driven primarily by these 3 factors: the exchange framework itself, the infrastructure needed to support banking and delivery, and long-term operational and energy requirements. For cost driver number 1, the commercial framework behind the exchange will be a major factor in overall project economics. Key considerations for this will include water accounting, the project governance model, risk allocation, exchange ratios, and cost sharing agreements between participating entities. And in terms of the overall exchange framework, stage 1 will be focusing on identifying viable project partners. Stage 2 develops preliminary business arrangements and evaluates commercial risks. And stage 3 refines this framework into something that can support implementation and ultimately be considered bankable. Second cost driver is the cost of the infrastructure itself, which will drive both capital and O&M costs. This would include the cost of some of the facilities or the infrastructure that Sujan mentioned, so recharge facilities, wells, pipelines, pumping systems, any treatment requirements, and supporting power infrastructure. As a collective team, we do have this experience in terms of evaluating infrastructure alternatives from both a constructability and operating perspective to really help make these informed design decisions. Overall, cost accuracy improves as the engineering detail increases. The intent is to move from conceptual design in stage 1 to more refined layouts, quantities, constructability assessments, and cost estimates in stages 2 and 3, with the ultimate goal of an estimate that provides WIFA the foundation needed to decide whether the project will move forward. And lastly, we expect operations and energy costs to be a driver for the cost of water on this project. This would include the cost necessary for things like power, staffing, and ongoing maintenance of these facilities. Again, the study will progressively improve our understanding of operational requirements and life cycle costs. These will be estimated early in stage 1, and by stage 3, we expect to have a much clearer view on things like reliability needs, operational strategies, and long-term cost implications. Okay, this final section here summarizes the stage approach and the outcomes expected at the end of each phase, each intended to reduce uncertainty and improve decision quality before additional investment is made. This is really culminated in the appraisal stage reports outlined by WIFA, which are provided to WIFA at the end of each stage. So for the groundwater project, the proposed appraisal staging is planned to occur over a period of approximately 26 months. Stage 1 screens a broad range of opportunities and narrows it down to a field of up to 3 candidate groundwater projects. Stage 2 will advance those 3 projects through a more detailed technical, environmental, regulatory, and commercial evaluation. Stage 3 focuses on refining those preferred options, reducing uncertainty, and providing the information required to make that go, no-go decision. Just get into a bit more detail for each stage. So at the end of stage 1, this is fundamentally a screening exercise. By this point, we will know which projects appear technically feasible and what locations and what partners we will have, whether those potential partners are interested, whether significant or environmental fatal flaws exist, whether the preliminary cost of water appears competitive to justify additional investment. By the end of stage 2, we're moving beyond screening into a stronger understanding of the 3 candidate projects. We'll have more robust engineering concepts, refined stakeholder engagement, preliminary commercial frameworks, and a Class 5 estimate. Again, the intent is to provide WIFA enough information as to whether one or more of these projects have a credible path forward towards implementation. Okay, and lastly, stage 3 is really about creating that implementation-ready confidence. By this point, we will expect to have preferred project or projects, a defined exchange framework, a clear permitting and regulatory roadmap, stakeholder pathways that have been substantially de-risked, and the most refined cost of water estimate. I do want to note that the outcome of this stage 3 is not a final design or construction readiness, but defensible basis for WIFA to decide whether the project should move into the next phase of project development. And the cost estimate class really reflects this as well. And I think that's it for our presentation. I hope I did okay for time, but Dan and I would be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Do we have any questions from the board at this time? Mr. Kim, then we'll go to Ted.
Want to go first?
Ted? Sure. Who was fastest on the draw?
Well, I don't know about fast.
All
But
right.
I'll be as fast as possible. So many of you all have heard this before, but this is a clarification rather than a question, then I'll get to the question. So that no groundwater is involved in this project at all. It's surface water. It's excess surface water. So just make that clear, because there's other groundwater projects that are going on in California that gets people pretty wound up. This is not one of those. I like the explanation. Thanks very much for a good presentation. I think to summarize in 15 minutes, a very complex project. The staging provides additional control, I'll call it, over the progress of this project. And the same thing is true for the other project that we're considering today, and hopefully the other 5 when they come forward. That allows WIFA to have a go, no go point at any point of the stages. So doing it a little bit at a time, expanding on the definition of what the project is going to look like, who's going to be involved, how much it's going to cost, all the things that these 2 fine folks outlined for us. So that we do not spend a ton of money like some of these other projects that we're being compared to? Why aren't you going as fast as them or getting water as soon as they are? Well, guess what? They never did because they didn't have the process that we have. So getting to the questions here, and I think the answer to this question is yes. It was the exchange framework is one of the things that was on your 5 major risks, along with things that I think are probably the other 4 are probably better understood. As far as infrastructure, cost, permitting even, and some of those type of things is how does this exchange framework going to work? And we're going to start out with 10 projects in stage 1, potential projects themselves, but embedded in that, and that are going to be narrowed down to 3, all in stage 1. Embedded in that is the consideration is, okay, how do we get that water from each one of those 10 projects to 3, from where it is being stored to where it will be locally used, and what further partners does that entity that's doing the local use have to exchange water with a Colorado River contractor? So there may be not just an exchange partner, there may be a string of exchange partners for each one of these types of things to get to that. And part of that consideration, I think, needs to be, and this is really my question here, is an exchange partner at the end of the string. So if it goes from somewhere in central to southern California, maybe that's a state water project participant or not, that needs to go over through Metropolitan and that way or down to Coachella or something like that. Who is the final exchange partner that will be exchanging in Arizona that still has up to 100,000 acre feet of Colorado River water available to them? Correct?
Yeah, you characterized it right. It's really key that the final exchange partner interacting with Arizona Exchange has the allocation and also is involved throughout the process in being able to tap into the storage we have in the groundwater banking project. So that is really key. Obviously, Metropolitan Water District would be a primary candidate given their allocation. They would be a key entity involved in exchange. So there are 2 exchange elements here. One is between the groundwater banking entity and the California exchange partner. That entity is going to be also involved with an exchange agreement with Arizona. So banking, California entity, Arizona. Now that's
as simple as it gets, though.
That's the simplest.
It's kind of three steps, and you could have 4 or 5 depending on who is involved along the way.
And as that connection happens,
right.
You're perfectly correct that there might be several additional entities and interested parties who would be connected through the exchange partner.
Okay. And one final comment too is the Bureau of Reclamation, I think, needs to be on your list of regulatory agencies that are going to be interested.
Yes, 100%.
My time's up.
Sorry about that, Ted. That was the 20
Okay,
minutes, so you guys did remarkably well.
That's it.
Okay.
Do I have time for a question?
You do.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. The that last line of questioning actually answered one of the questions that I had, which is, look, basically, if I understand this correctly, we're taking river water, we're storing it somewhere, and then we're going to trade that for whatever. Today, what happens to that water? If nothing were to happen, what happens to that water right now?
So it's excess flows. In fact, Christy and I were talking about it. Some of it is just flowing into the ocean. Actually, during 2023, in our proposal, we showed a graph. Some of this flows actually is resulting in flooding. So there is actually an added benefit if you're able to take that water and store it. We are reducing the load on the downstream infrastructure. So
in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. So must be nice that you could just live in a place where you could just let the water flow into the ocean. Kind of a different situation than what we live in. Yes. Okay. So my question was going to be like, okay, so they have so much water that they're just letting it flow into the ocean. We're going to create buckets for them to save that water. In exchange, we're going to take some water somewhere else. My question is going to be, how many buckets do they need? right? And like, is there eventually going to be a time when like they're just, we don't need any more buckets. We've saved as much as we need to. But that, his line of questioning answered that, right? So it's got to get to somewhere who actually needs the water, right? Which is the second leg of the thing that you were talking about. Good. Why wouldn't these people build this themselves?
You want to start?
No, it's okay.
It's
hot potato.
I guess, in fact, we talked about it. That's where the funding comes from. There is a limitation of dollars. And also, a lot of times these groundwater storage and recovery entities are located in rural areas without a deep bench of funding and budget to support these projects. We have seen situations where an exchange partner has funded these entities to build the storage. We are involved in several projects in California where there is active effort to increase the number of groundwater storage and recovery facilities because, as we all know, building a storage above ground is nice. That would have been ideal, but it's a long permitting process. I was involved in a project called Sites that I started in 1997, imaging myself, still going on. So surface storage is difficult. Groundwater storage just over the last 4 or 5 years has seen a significant uptick of interest. And part of the reason the core partners we have proposed this project is when we are talking to these entities, there is a lot of interest in getting external funding support. So going back to your question, Mr. Kim, there is a lot of interest in funding support as long as it's a win-win solution.
It's a good answer. It's a depressing one. Effectively, what you're saying is that it's too much of a pain in the ass and they're too much brain damage and too expensive to build stuff in the United States. And so they want partners to help defray that cost. This also, by the way, is my reaction to the other 20 years as a, yay, this is doing it the right way. My comment is why? Okay, final question. In terms of the sequencing of all this, it seems to me that risk number one is the make or break, right? And really, it's not just someone to dance with, but someone to dance with and then buy the water afterwards. And if you don't have those two things, then nothing else matters. To what extent have we tried to optimize the plan so that we're not spending money on engineering and regulatory and yada this and yada that until we actually have a deal in hand, right? Now, I understand in order to get number one over the line, you might have to do some of that stuff. I get that. But on the other hand, I also understand that it's very profitable to do that work. And it's our problem, not yours, right? If there's nobody to dance with at the end of the day. So tell me what we're doing in order to avoid that outcome.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And I do think that we've really refined and honed in on the scopes of all of the tasks for appraisal stage 1 in particular, which I think is what you're talking about. That's really when we're going to find that partner to dance with, so to speak. In terms of the level of design or work that's happening at that stage, it's very preliminary, essentially enough to be able to come to those meetings prepared and be able to speak intelligently to them about what we're proposing. I guess majority of the work in stage 1 is really around, understanding those regulatory barriers, having those engagements with stakeholders, and really starting to build out the initial commercial framework. At the level of design and consulting work at that stage is quite minimized. And I don't know, Sujan, if you have anything else to add to that.
And I will just jump in on that conversation too, to echo what Kirsty said in terms of that was a huge part of our negotiation of these scopes is what happens when, and when do you as the board have the opportunity to say, we don't see a path forward, where is the off-ramp or where's the acceleration point for a particular project? And so we can talk more, probably not in this forum because I want the teams to have the opportunity, but more about what our plan is to discuss some of those exchange engagement frameworks and what the breakdown of work is going to be in that between WIFA as the state entity and the offtake or the teams themselves, developer teams. But that's a really good question. And the goal of the scopes is to be that we're not spending money developing information that ultimately becomes useless because we answer a question.
Good. One last comment. That third person, the people who are actually going to use the water, that's critical because otherwise, because if that's not there, then eventually we're going to have to just start building more buckets, and that's just dumb. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
we
you. No
fully
further.
agree with that, and it
Okay.
is in our scope to consult with them as well.
Awesome. No further questions. Thank you.
We have questions from two board members online. Sue Montgomery, we'll take you first.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And first, I want to thank the teams and the WIFA staff and the members of the board working on these projects. It is a lot, and there's just such an immense amount of work that's gone into this. It's beyond. It's really beyond and above and beyond the call. I had a list of questions. I know time is sort of an issue, but I wanted to focus in on a couple of questions. Several of which I think have been answered. So maybe I'll set those aside. But a question related to Task 4 that I wanted to ask about, and I found myself when I was writing my notes, going through all the stages of Task 4. I kept asking myself, when do we actually talk to the stakeholders? When do we communicate? There's a lot of discussion about building a matrix and identifying stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera. But I kept asking myself, well, when are we actually talking to the stakeholders? And by that, I mean sort of all the different, affected communities, governments, tribal nations, and other critical stakeholders. So I want to set that aside for just a second, and you can answer that in a minute. But we're really focused today on stage 1. And when I looked at stage 1, and I'm thinking of Task 4, it shows me here, and I'm just looking at it, that you're going to be doing sort of a desktop level inventory of, for example, affected communities, I said it, government entities, tribal nations, and critical stakeholders, potential political obstacles, social and community elements, et cetera. And I want to understand better what that desktop level inventory looks like. Because in my experience, a lot of times, and stage 1 is going to be critical, right? It's a go, no go to whether we move forward on stage 2, stage 3, et cetera. In my experience, a lot of time, those desktop level inventories miss a lot of key players. And I see no information, even from stage 2 to stage 3, of are we engaging with SHPO? How are we engaging with affected tribes? I see in stage 3, tribal consultation is excluded as an exclusion, barring written direction. So maybe you could first start with this desktop level question. It's like, how are we meaningfully going to actually identify the players and that risk that is associated with that piece of this at that early stage? Because if we miss them, we're flying blind moving forward. And then maybe tell me, when do we actually talk to anybody? And then at what stage? And then thirdly, explain to me why tribal consultation in stage 3 is excluded. Those are my questions starting out on the Task 4. I had one other question that I would like to get to, but that's on Task 4.
I'll start out with, I think, your first question in terms of when are we meeting with the respective stakeholders. That's already started, and it will continue to progress into stage 1 and in the continued stages. In terms of the desktop,
well, if I may, who? I mean, when you're saying you're meeting with stakeholders, is it communities, government entities? I know we're obviously talking to entities. Is it tribal nations? What other critical stakeholders? I want to be clear and understand when you say that. That sounded very sweeping to me.
Do you want me to take that? Yeah. So Sue, I will actually take that from the WIFA perspective, because one of the key elements of our stakeholder engagement thus far has been that WIFA has been very protective and controlling of that engagement, in that all of it has been directed and initiated by WIFA as the state entity in order to gauge the willingness of these partners to then directly interact with private entities.
I got you there.
So I can certainly give you a list of the folks that we have met with if you'd like to see that, but just off the top of my head, water regulators in California. We have met with several irrigation districts, as well as other potential exchange partners, irrigation districts and water districts in California. We've had very, very high level conversations with some folks in Mexico, no commitments being made, nothing but just daylighting the process. We have not had direct engagement with tribal governments, but we have continued to keep at least Arizona entities that are helping us with that communication in line. So that's just a snapshot.
And Chelsea, I'm aware of all that. Yeah. I'm trying to focus to moving forward as we try to look at the risks of in stage 1. I understand those. I'm thinking of other groups that could derail this project or have real concerns about this project. And that's tribes in California, it's communities, it's potential NGOs or other entities that we have to be thinking about. So maybe we could get the answer on the desktop level and how that works.
I can answer that question briefly here. So when we started looking at this as a potential project, we did have some very informal consultations with several entities in California, see if there is even interest. And so we had very initial discussions with a few groundwater banking entities that had some interest. Since then, as Director McGuire mentioned, we have not had direct discussions with any of the groundwater storage or recovery entities or banking partners for two reasons. One is that communication is very sensitive. If it's communicated the wrong way, here is Arizona taking water from California or somebody else taking water from their groundwater bank. So we wanted to make sure that framework, as Christy was mentioning, is well developed, the messaging is consistent, and it's a win-win solution. So we're going to be spending some time in stage one to make sure that we are in sync with WIFA's messaging before we go and talk to the groundwater entities. Now, in terms of the desktop study, thanks to SGMA, which is a Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in California, there are a series of applications that are submitted every year. And last time we looked, there were over 330 potential groundwater storage and recovery projects. We've taken an initial look at them. Stantec, which is part of the core team, and some of our partners have been working in California area. We have an understanding of the hydrogeologic conditions. So to optimize the value of your dollars, we felt that instead of actually going and doing detailed studies at stage one, we have sufficient information through SGMA and also our experience on other similar projects to identify those 10 target initial projects and further screen them. On parallel, once we go through those 10 projects, we'll be getting into more stakeholder interaction. Hope that answers your question.
I don't really feel it did. And I don't want to belabor this, Mr. Chairman, but I'm trying to understand, for example, for stage one, some of this preliminary desktop is going to look at available information related to relevant governing bodies, quality of life indicators for environmental tasks, demographic and socioeconomic identification, including census data, cultural findings. So that's partly what I'm also trying to understand. I understand what you're saying, and it's all very valuable and very important. And certainly you're well on task on that. I'm trying to understand these other things that I'm not hearing about from you. How are you going to identify, for example, cultural findings or socioeconomic conditions at stage one with a desktop level? And does that capture the potential risk or challenges that to be able to weed it out to 3 projects at that stage?
So the goal for us is to really identify the low-hanging 3 projects, not necessarily take on the most challenging projects.
Hopefully, yeah.
Our expectation when we had discussions with WIFA as we went through the process is instead of identifying a complex greenfield study in the middle of nowhere where folks have not done much work, we are targeting projects which have some reasonable amount of development already in place. There is potentially a groundwater banking entity that's managing it through SGMA or through adjudicated basis. And that existing information would provide us significant amount of data to keep it to a desktop level as opposed to doing a lot of in-field investigations.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to leave this live for now, but I did have one other question with your indulgence, and I'll go real quick.
Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talk about 2 of the big risks being both conveyance and also the hydrogeologic issues associated with wherever the storage might be. And that's all very true. So there's a lot of places in the stages, including stage 1, 2, and 3, where we talk about doing field verification and other forms of verification. Is it in stage 2 that we actually dial in and start doing like geotech and ground truthing the potential for those 3 projects and the storage capability, et cetera, et cetera? Is that when that is? I just wanted to make sure I understood.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave the rest live, Mr. Chairman, but thank you very much.
Promises, promises.
I will, at least now. Thank you.
All right, Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I put my raised hand down only because I think we're all nipping around the same edges. In terms of bankable funding and partners, they are inextricably intertwined because costs change based on how many partners become involved. And so how are you doing the deep dive on that piece of it, the bankability of it, the funding of it, when you may not know how many partners you have or could have?
Yeah, I'll speak to that first, and then if Sujan wants to chime in. But certainly one of the first things that we'll be looking at as part of stage 1 is commercial arrangement complexity, how many partners are involved, what the potential commercial arrangements might be. And that will certainly be part of our evaluation criteria as we look to determine which 3 projects that we want to take forward. So it's hard to say right now what those commercial arrangements might look like, but certainly that will be a key consideration as we look at the overall complexity of what this might look like, and will be fed into our initial financial models as part of our task 5 work.
It's just a caution, Christy, from my perspective, that you don't know what you don't know. You can't. And as potential with partners evolves, that's going to have an impact, of course, on everything. And it will be your challenge to make it make sense for us. But I see it as a hurdle to take a very deep dive in and making sure the rationale is there for what partner, where, how much. Forgive my barking dog.
We fully agree, and your comment is certainly well noted. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board at this time? Thank you for your presentation. And I would like to now call up EPCOR Water Innovation Partners South Bay Potable Reuse Project Team for their presentation.
As they're coming up, Mr. Chair, we'll note we do have a public comment noticed in between each of these agenda items, but there is no request to speak on either at this point. So if that changes, we will certainly let you know.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. You're stuck with me, but you now get Dr. Rob Sim, who is our design manager for the South Bay Potable Reuse Project. This concept focuses on creating new water supply through advanced potable reuse and leveraging an exchange framework as well. But I'll now pass it on to Rob to describe the project.
Oh, okay. I can talk from behind here and people can see me. I thought back there that I might be too vertically challenged. So this particular project is based upon us using treated wastewater, treating it to potable standard. And this is wastewater at the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant in the San Diego area where we're currently working. And then taking that potable water, taking it across the border into Tijuana and exchanging that water for Colorado River water that Mexico has. It's a paper exchange right now. And we're taking a phased approach. If you want to go to the next slide, just to give you a very, very brief overview, the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant is a very large wastewater facility. The site capacity is approximately 100 million gallons per day. It takes them a lot of the wastewater from Tijuana. The interesting thing here is that Tijuana also has Colorado River water. And the Colorado River water, go to the next slide. Colorado River water goes from Morelos Dam, where it's diverted, all the way across northern Baja, and it goes to Tijuana. And what we're proposing to do is to not only build a potable reuse facility on the U.S. side to take wastewater from the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant, but also to upgrade the conveyance between Tijuana and Morelos Dam. And one of the things that is an option, and we if you look at our scoping document, one of the things that we talk about, we acknowledge that the exchange on the Colorado River is potentially a big risk here. When we've looked at these projects, the EPCOR water group, we looked at them as a program. We have a desalination project that's on the table as well. I'm not here to talk about that, but we do reference that project, and we do identify that we would be looking at, under the desalination project, the opportunity to take a pipeline into Arizona. That's not our first choice, but that's an option that we will look at if we can't get the exchange, or if the exchange is problematic on the Colorado River. Next slide. So what are the phases? Once we build a conveyance across the border into Mexico, that opens up opportunities for an exchange sooner rather than later. I can't speak for the city of San Diego, but if you look at the news, local San Diego news, we have an office there. There is discussions, or there's talk, that the city of San Diego has additional water that they potentially would like to exchange. So once that conveyance is there, there might be an opportunity to do that. The first phase, after what we're calling this phase 0, is to build a smaller first phase South Bay water potable reuse facility, maybe go to, like, say, 14,000 acre feet per year. While we're doing that, upgrading and repairing the conveyance across northern Baja. One of the issues when you look at what's published is that there's some discussion that the actual conveyance across northern Baja is single pipe, and it needs to be repaired. So there's an opportunity to potentially repair that, and then go to phases 2 and 3, taking us to approximately 95,000 acre feet. And then the fourth and final phase would be, actually, once you've got the conveyance across northern Baja upgraded, potentially putting in a desalination facility either on the Mexican side or the U.S. side of the border, and you've got that conveyance, and then taking it either to Morelos for exchange, or depending upon whether that desal facility goes ahead, piggybacking on that, and basically connecting in with that. Next slide. Key stakeholders, there's a number of key stakeholders here. I'm not going to go through the entire list. We are actively working in this area. We've been working with IBWC for decades. All of our partners have been. Bodewell, who is our PR consultant, stakeholder consultant on this. We know all the players in the area. There's a lot of stakeholders in this area. We know most of them. My concern is always the ones that we don't know. So comms is going to be really important on this project, and making sure we get the word out to all the affected parties. And then obviously Bureau of Rec is important on the exchange mechanism, because that's a key part of this, as it is for many of these WIPs. Next slide. I'm not going to belabor all of this. I mean, the major infrastructure elements are the advanced water purification plant, potable water conveyance, pumping, storage, and interconnections. Next slide. Power infrastructure is important. When you have water reuse and you have desal, you need power. If you follow what's going on with power across the United States and around the world, power is a limitation for a number of reasons. And then we're going to have to upgrade the treatment plant, likely at South Bay, for this potable reuse. And then finally, a phase 4 of a desalination facility. Although right now, the Mexicans are building a desal facility in Rosarito. And so one of the things that's obvious is, could we talk to them about adding to that plant and potentially working together to the benefit of both parties? So I'm going to pass it to you, this point.
Thanks, Rob. So for the remainder of the presentation, we'll really follow the same format as you saw for the groundwater. We'll talk about the 5 risks specific to this project. So the ones that we've identified from our perspective, the top risks relate to exchange reliability, affordability, power availability, treatment requirements, and public acceptance. Collectively, these factors will determine whether the concept is practical and scalable. So this first risk addresses the long-term reliability of the exchange mechanism. If future Colorado River conditions limit exchange opportunities, specifically low levels in Lake Mead and Lake Powell, as we heard earlier in this board meeting, project benefits could be reduced. The appraisal will look at alternative approaches, as Rob had alluded to, exchange reliability scenarios, and operational flexibility under varying river conditions. Secondly, we identify affordability. Success here ultimately depends on whether off-takers are willing and able to purchase the resulting water supply. Determining the delivered cost of water and understanding affordability from an off-taker perspective will be a central focus throughout the appraisal process, particularly on economies of scale as we work through project phasing. Next, we have power as both a feasibility and a cost risk. The appraisal will investigate whether sufficient electrical infrastructure exists to support treatment, pumping, expansion, and potential future desalination facilities, and what upgrades may be required. So this is primarily a task 1 activity. Water quality considerations are always important for potable reuse projects, as we all know. This risk centers on understanding source water characteristics, evaluating treatment requirements, and determining whether any contaminants could materially impact cost, operations, or permitting. And last, but as we know, certainly not least, public perception can be a determining factor in potable reuse projects. The appraisal that we're undergoing here does include significant stakeholder and community engagement efforts designed to understand concerns, identify potential issues early, and develop strategies to support an informed public dialogue and ultimately acceptance. And this will be primarily done as part of our Task 4 efforts. Again, we've identified what we believe to be the top 3 cost drivers at this time on the project. Similar to the groundwater project, the economics of the project are largely influenced by 3 areas: the treatment infrastructure, the conveyance infrastructure, and the exchange framework itself. The appraisal work is intended to refine our definition of all 3 and identify where the greatest uncertainty exists. So for cost driver number 1, treatment facilities are expected to represent one of the largest cost components on this project. The appraisal will evaluate facility sizing, technology options, treatment requirements, operational considerations, and future expansion opportunities in order to establish realistic cost expectations in a progressive nature. Each stage improves confidence in facility requirements and costs. We begin with screening and concept evaluation, move into feasibility assessments and life cycle analysis, and ultimately refine for design configuration to be able to sufficiently support future investment decisions. Our second cost driver is the conveyance aspects of the project. So as Rob mentioned, moving water efficiently and reliably is fundamental to creating value from this project. Conveyance investments may include pipelines, pumping facilities, storage system interconnections, and upgrades to existing infrastructure if identified. Understanding these requirements will be a major focus of the technical evaluations, and we'll be looking to reduce pumping where possible and make use of topography where we can. Similar to the treatment facilities, conveyance concepts become progressively more refined through each stage. By the end of the appraisal process, we expect to have a much clearer understanding of implementation requirements, ownership considerations, and associated costs. And the last cost driver is the exchange structure itself. So as we all know, the exchange mechanism is more than just a legal agreement. It directly impacts project economics, financing, risk allocation, and overall bankability. Establishing a viable commercial and regulatory framework is therefore as important as the technical information itself, or arguably more important. The appraisal progresses from confirming basic viability of the exchange concept to developing more mature commercial frameworks and ultimately identifying the elements needed to support implementation agreements and financing discussions. Again, the final section here summarizes the overall appraisal program for this project, and it is really structured to progressively improve confidence and support future decision making. So the proposed appraisal stages here are expected to span across approximately 27 months, so 1 month longer than the previously mentioned project, which seems to be a bit of a competition point. But stage 1 focuses on identifying and screening viable concepts. Stage 2 advances those concepts through further evaluations and sharper cost definition. Stage 3 develops a preferred concept to a sufficient level of design in order to provide the technical, regulatory, environmental, financial, and commercial information needed to support the future go, no-go decision. So again, at the end of stage 1, the objective is to demonstrate whether potential feasible reuse importation options exist, whether an exchange framework appears achievable, and whether there is sufficient stakeholder, agency, and commercial interest in order to justify the investment. At this stage, we will also have an order of magnitude cost of water. At the end of stage 2, this will provide a much stronger understanding of project feasibility. We expect to have preferred technical configurations, a clear power strategy, better defined environmental and social impacts, a preliminary commercial structure, and a Class 5 cost estimate supporting evaluation of overall project viability. And lastly, by the end of stage 3, the goal is to present a recommended project concept together with a quantified understanding of its risk, cost, implementation path, and commercial pathway. We'll also have a Class 4 estimate available at this time. And at this point, WIFA would have the information necessary to determine whether advancement into the implementation planning is warranted. And I think that's it. So again, we'd be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Any questions from the board? Drew? Yes.
Yeah, one thing that kind of keeps sticking to my mind as you go through all of these is, I like the paper exchange thing. It seems like a less expensive program to work. But my concern is when if there's no water in the Colorado River and you have a paper exchange, are the pipelines, or is pipelines anticipated for Plan B, the more expensive thing, or are they already there? That's one thing that,
That's our concern as well, right? And so that's why on this one, we've added the option to look at direct supply into Arizona, and then it becomes then you look at two issues. First of all, how much does that cost to move the water, and then it's a volume game, right? The more water you move, the marginal cost goes down, right? So we would come to WIFA and say, okay, we're looking at the exchange mechanism. It doesn't look very commercially interesting, not only for the off-takers, but for the developers. So you're probably a direct pipeline. And this is how much water, this is what you'd have to do, and this is how much water you'd have to move to make it affordable, right? And then we are at a position where you can make a decision. And we want to make that decision as quickly as possible, because the development team, I can't speak for all of them, we don't want to work on something that doesn't become an executable project. Just like you don't want to spend money on something that doesn't become an executable project. So, did that answer your question?
Hey.
I have my own questions, but can follow up on that last. Sorry, were you talking about building a pipeline from Mexico into Arizona?
Potentially. So if you look at what our desal project is doing, they're taking the pipeline to Morelos Dam and they're putting the water in Morelos. Okay. So what we've,
In the interest of time, I just one quick question on that. Every single time a pipeline comes up from Mexico into Arizona, I keep asking the question, who's going to protect it?
no, it's good. It's a good question. Just, yeah.
It's going to get blown up. I mean, okay. Anyway, the other question that I have is with regards to, at the end of the day, this is taking effluent, right? Processing it and all that stuff, right? And then I tend to think it's systems. And so like the immediate thing I saw before this was talking about taking water that's currently being thrown out into the ocean, right? That seems to me cheaper, right? Than using that stuff as opposed to, it's just cheaper, right? It's probably better quality too. I don't know. But why couldn't you just use that water and then feed it into this demand source? Is it because of conveyance issues and things like that?
When you say that water, do you mean from the groundwater?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's more a matter of location, right? Like, I mean, the groundwater projects are in, I mean, they're two different options, right? And that's what, this appraisal process is really going to help inform is what, whether the groundwater project is more cost effective than the reuse or vice versa. Like we will have an opportunity, especially with the timing, to compare the various WIPs.
Definitely comparing these two. I'm trying to sit there if I can merge them.
Oh,
do you see what I'm saying? Look, I get it, right? Like the rule of thumb that I've got in my head is every time I'm asked looking at water stuff, and again, I haven't been at this as long as you guys have, quality, quantity, cost, and location, right? Great. So on the location side of this stuff, right? If there is conveyance that could use, like if it can get to Metropolitan, why can't it get to San Diego? If it can get to San Diego, why can't it get to Tijuana? And if you see what I'm saying, yeah, go ahead.
So the water currently is able to get to Tijuana from the Colorado River. And there are agreements in place that the United States can provide potable water on a limited basis to Tijuana. And so right now, if you look at what's happening at South Bay International Wastewater Plant, it's quite a contentious issue in the area, in the San Diego area, because the wastewater, a lot of it gets into the Tijuana River and it ends up in the ocean. And the premise of this project is to create a win-win for the city of San Diego, for Tijuana, and for all the stakeholders in that area. Take that water, which
and us too, right?
Yeah, us too. Because that water is a resource, right? It is a valuable resource. So my argument would be, why am I sending it to the ocean? Why am I not treating that water, putting it back to Tijuana, and then potentially exchanging that and creating a win-win for Tijuana, the beachgoers in the city of San Diego, and the taxpayers in Arizona?
I understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's like not a good thing to do. But from the perspective of the people of Arizona, right, what we really care about is getting water efficiently and cheaply inside of here. So my original question stands, right, which is, why couldn't we use the cheaper, better water that's from that other project and then fund it into the people that want to use it inside of Tijuana? Can you do that?
Yeah. It comes down to location.
Yeah, and the location says, then the conveyance says that you cannot do that today.
So in that particular water, I mean, I'm not as familiar with the groundwater project as Kirsty and
all I'm
Sujan.
asking is, can A get to B, get to C, get to D, get to E?
We're doing some of those exchanges right now. So like some of the water.
Okay. Thank you.
It's
possible. It is possible.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Sue.
Just real quick, on the pipeline potential coming into Arizona, is the all of that stakeholder here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about identifying, I know who we've talked to, or I think I understand who we've talked to on most of these. It's who we haven't talked to. And so is the viability of a pipeline coming into Arizona, for example, is that being evaluated from the stakeholder and the quality of life and the environmental and the socioeconomic and the cultural? Is that evaluated in stage one? Or is that sort of a backup plan that if the exchanges don't seem viable. Then we go to the pipeline into Arizona piece, and then we start doing evaluation of all of those potential impacted communities and stakeholders that we haven't talked to. Like, when does that happen?
Yeah, I'll start. The primary basis for our proposal is based upon the exchange mechanism working. However, we will, if needed, look into, and it's included in our scope, look into alternative, methods, at which time we're going to have another look at, what scope makes sense in terms of stakeholder consultation. Can it be repurposed from the previous, concept or the initial concept, or do we have to really relook at, what makes sense?
Is that in stage one, or is that in what stage is that happening?
The technical and financial feasibility is in stage one. Okay. You might get to that point and WIFA might go, okay, this project doesn't look feasible for us. And then we're finished. If it looks like there has to be a pipeline, then at that point, it would likely be stage two that you would be going to the stakeholders, because you've got to go with them with something. So I don't see us going to the stakeholders on that until stage two.
I see. And that's sort of where we're going to have to say, okay, heaven forbid.
Yeah, just to pick up on your last, your line of questioning for the groundwater as well. One of the things that we always have to be cognizant of, and I've done many, many, many of these, is that we want to make sure we go to the public at the time when we can answer all of the obvious questions, right? So we have to do enough work, right? So we can ask, they're going to say, what routes did you think about? Did you think about this route? Who have you talked to, right? That kind of thing. So we have to do enough work. What does it cost? Right. So we have to do enough work that we can actually talk to them intelligently.
It's a balance, right? You can't. It is
a balance.
You can't fully bake the cake, but you got to figure out.
And you don't want to be in a position where we're not trying to hide information from you, but we've got to do. And that's why I think the comms plan is important, and basically updating the public and potential stakeholders on what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we're studying, what the outcomes are going to be, so that you can say, hey, we told you that information, we don't have it, but it's coming, right? So.
And identifying the right stakeholders, or
identifying the right stakeholders.
But the stakeholders that we're not thinking about now, or even in the stage one, they might come out of the woodwork, and we need to be ahead of that and be respectful of that as well. So
I can't count the number of times that I thought I knew all the stakeholders.
So true. Well said.
I didn't, right? Because they come, like you said, they come out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
And that's not a criticism. That happens. It happens.
Donna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So knowing that that's a process that is inevitable, they're going to come out of the woodwork. Is there some rationale for only looking at pipeline if the other options aren't feasible for one reason or another? Or is it not possible to look at pipeline and?
Yeah, I think in terms of stakeholders, I think regardless, we're going to be working with WIFA and maintaining a stakeholder log for any and all aspects of the project. We want to make sure that we don't have surprises if and when things progress, and that we don't have, folks come out of the woodwork as we said. Although I don't think we'll be progressing on a technical side on this pipeline option, I do think regardless, we need to, be prudent and maintain that list of, potential, actual or potential stakeholders or interested.
Absolutely.
And I just want to make sure we have an accurate list as best as we can, and don't make assumptions we know what the list is, because I see that a lot, and oftentimes tribes get left off that list. But
so our number one option is exchange, because building a pipeline is problematic from a number of perspectives. So that's our number one option. And as was said in the previous, WIFA has rightfully identified that they're going to lead the public consultation and the comps, because it's their project. And we're going to take our marching orders from them.
Do we have Do we have any additional questions? Ted?
Two quick ones. So I'll start with the pipeline because I think that's actually easier to answer. So when we were talking about the pipeline in your little diagram there, I think you said that the outflow for the pipeline would be just above Morelos Sand. Okay, so in essence, then that would, I think, still be a kind of exchange because it's at that point it's too late for Arizona to take it, and so Mexico would actually take that as part of their main stem allocation, and Arizona would divert it higher up on the river.
And so, but just on that point though, Mr. Cook, here's the rub. I know you know this probably more about this on the exchanges, the intentionally created surplus. I mean, of your background, but the issue with the exchange is when can you can put the water in there in Morelos, when can we get it, right? Because once it goes into Morelos Dam or Morelos upstream of the dam, it becomes system water, right? And then you got to talk about forbearance and all these other issues. And so when can you take it, especially given the hydrology of the river as it currently is? So when we're talking about the exchange mechanism being a risk, that's the specific risk that we're concerned about. And we know we're doing a number of projects on in-state supply. When we brainstormed this, we came up with more than 20 options. So we've got a couple that we're moving now, and that's the rub is if you're the off taker, when do you get the water? And so there's a lot of people looking at that and talking to the Bureau and Department of Interior and how do we solve that piece?
So there's more hair on the pipeline option than just cost and social acceptance.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question, you had mentioned there, and I'm referring now to your phase slide. So the 4 phases of this particular project. And early on, phase 1 might be exchanging some of the existing excess supply available from the Carlsbad plant, desal plant. Later, you mentioned the possibility of the desal projects that are one of the other whips that you are working on with us that we're not hearing about today. Correct? Yeah. And that could be one plant or it could be two plants. And then you also mentioned Rosarito. So just to clarify, that's the plant that Mexico is building itself. It's not one of the ones that EPCOR is considering.
No, it's not. And so the rationale for mentioning it is, okay, somebody's building a plant now, somebody's doing the planning, somebody's got a site, somebody's doing environmental studies. Is there an opportunity for us to work with them and make that plant? I don't know yet. We haven't been authorized to talk to them, but is there an opportunity for us to work with them, make that plant bigger, and potentially the win-win for them is the upgrade of the conveyance so that reach within Mexico, that plant is greater to the benefit of both parties. I don't know that yet, but that's the thought process.
Okay, well that makes a lot of sense. So here's my actual question on that. So potentially using water from this Rosarito desal plant that might be built doesn't have all of the positive features of upgrading the water treatment and water reclamation plant capacity because it doesn't deal with treating wastewater at all. But it could potentially, I'll use a pejorative term, be competitive with the treated water sources from those 2 water treatment plants.
Yes, it could be, and it could be additive. And I think once we get into it, one of the things when you start to look at the commercial structures and you start to look at Task 5, one of the things that's going to become obvious is that I know you've asked for 10,000 acre feet, but moving more water is going to bring the price down. So from an economics point of view, you might want to hook up 2 or 3 of these sources because it makes more economic sense. We want to make sure that it's fine to build these things, but we have to have off takers on the back end that can actually afford the water that it's at a reasonable price. And one way to do that is scale. That's the other reason for the basin.
Thank you. Do we have any additional questions from the board? Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from the board for WIFA staff at this time? And have we received any requests for public comment?
No request to speak on this item.
All right. Agenda items 11A and 11B involved the consideration and possible adoption of amendments to the base contracts for the respective projects, as well as approval of their scopes of work and budgets for stage 1 services. Because these topics cover ongoing negotiations, we have noticed an executive session, but before entertaining a motion to go into executive session, is there any additional or further board member discussion on this item?
We do have a hand up that looks like Mr. Chairman from Tim.
Tim?
Uh, Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Just wanted to take a moment before we go to the next step on these just to thank the teams for their hard work here. And I know it's been a long process to get to where we are, and I'm very hopeful that we have actual real world opportunities in front of us. And I especially want to just voice that these are two. We have a lot of great ideas, and these are two that I think have a really high possibility, if not probability, of being real water solutions for Arizona with partnership and with benefits to the source areas for it. So I just wanted to, on the record, voice that I'm very happy that if we were going to start with two, these are two that I think have a high degree of potential. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Tim. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to enter executive session for agenda items 11A and 11B for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel for legal advice and to instruct WIFA's representatives regarding active contract negotiations pursuant to ARS 38.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, board members who are online, you have a link to a Teams meeting. I would ask you to exit the Zoom, enter into the Teams. We will make our way into that executive conference room and we will come back out when we're ready. We did not. So Joe, I will read that into the record while we're still in the public. Do you have that?
I had it.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
For the record, the following individuals are invited to join the board in executive session: Director Chelsea McGuire, Assistant Director of Finance Denise Olson, Assistant Director of External Affairs Ben Alternator Jason Fort, Jonathan Noga and Carl Stock from HDR, Stephen Otten Smith and David Catt from Ernst & Young, all to provide technical support, and General Counsel Joe Satelli and Liz Cousins from Nosman to provide legal support. Thank you.
It's 12:23. We're back in regular session.
DJ Lyons.
Did you say do that again?
Let's try this again. All right. I'm going to call roll. Ted Cook.
Here.
Patrice Hartman.
Here.
He's on. Here. Pete Kim. Here. Michaels.
Here.
Stephen Miller.
Here.
Montgomery.
Here.
Tim Tamir.
Here.
Myself. We have a quorum. Non-voting members, Elizabeth Alvarado Thorson. Tom Bushatsky.
Lainey Meeker for Director Bishatsky.
Gail Griffin. Lauren Kuby. Karen Peters.
Here.
Robin Zaid. TJ Shope. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. And Sandra Watson. During the executive session, the board have an opportunity to obtain legal counsel for items 11A and 11B. Is there anything that any board members wish to add at this time regarding our discussion? Regarding agenda item 11A, Joe, do you have?
Ben can move to the next slide and the proposed motion language should be there.
Okay. There's the proposed motion language for item 11A. May we have a motion stating the motion as described on the slide? Yes, Ted.
I'll make the motion to approve the amended and restated base contract, scope of work and budget for stage 1 task services in amount not to exceed $3,211,055 for the EPCOR groundwater WIP.
Thank you, Ted. Do we have a second?
Pete Kim, second.
Thank you very much. Yes. Do we have any board member discussion? No further discussion. We'll call for a vote. As a reminder, 6 votes are necessary for expenditure of funds from the long-term water augmentation fund. Given that, I will now ask for a roll call vote. And Chelsea, would you like to do that?
Happy to do so. Mr. Kim.
Aye.
Ms. Montgomery.
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. John.
Aye.
Ms. Horstman.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Tomier.
Aye.
Ms. Michaels.
Aye.
Chairman Lyons.
Aye. It's unanimous. Motion carries. Regarding 11B, may we have a motion and may we have the language? There it is. Do we have a motion for item 11B?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I make a motion again?
Yes, Ted.
Okay. I move to approve the amended and restated base contract, scope of work, and budget for stage 1 task services in an amount not to exceed $4,106,617 for the EPCOR South Bay WIP.
Do we have a
Second. I seconded it.
All right, Donna. Thank you for that second. Is there any board member discussion? No further discussion. We will call for a vote. As a reminder, 6 votes are necessary for expenditure of funds from a long-term water augmentation fund. Given that, I will now ask for a roll call vote. Director McGuire, would you please call?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kim.
Aye.
Ms. Montgomery.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. John.
Aye.
Ms. Horstman.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Tomier.
Aye.
Ms. Michaels.
Aye.
Chairman Lyons.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate the teams and the proposals that they put forward. We're anxious to get started and please go forth and conquer.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, as given the time, there are a few items that I believe you are going to plan to table, and those are going to be on the agenda here today. Item number 14 and item number 15. We will quickly move through 12AB and 13 because those are more time sensitive than the others. 14 and 15 we will defer to a future meeting. So we'll go to 12A, and I think we're calling on Joe for that one.
All right, Joe.
Thank you, Chairman Lyons. Joe Satelli, General Counsel. I've sent the links over to whomever is controlling the presentation for the resolutions. These resolutions were provided in the board materials publicly as well. The point of these items is to allow for the efficient administration of the base contract. As we've seen, there are administrative changes. There are things in the contracts themselves that require approvals. We wanted to put a resolution in front of you that allows the board to direct staff, the director, and other agencies as appropriate to take administrative actions under the contract. We've also put in some specific guardrails to enable you to feel comfortable providing that authority, specifically that there will be no increases in the stage 1 NTEs that are not otherwise accounted for in the contract, things like routine escalation clauses, and also that no expenses associated with stage 2 or stage 3 will be incurred for the two projects that you've just identified as well. We have added the amounts as approved by the board just now to these resolutions, and if the resolutions are appropriate, I would ask the board to approve the resolutions as modified on the screens here today.
Do we have any questions from the board for staff? Have we received any requests for public comment?
No request to speak on this item.
I'll bring it back to the board for any additional board discussion. If not, may we have a motion on agenda item 12A for resolution 2027-014.
Drew John, I'll make the motion that we approve resolution 2027-014 EPCOR groundwater storage and recovery project contract administration stage 1.
Thank you, Drew. Do we have a second?
I can second that, Mr. Chairman, Sue Montgomery.
Thank you, Sue. Any additional board member discussion? No further discussion. We will call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item 12B, Joe.
Again, this is the, thank you, Chairman Lyons. Again, same resolution for just the second project that you've approved today, and happy to answer any questions about that.
And I will also note there was a typo in this resolution. You're seeing in real time on the screen that being fixed. It mentioned the California Groundwater Storage Project. It's actually the South Bay Potable Water Reuse Project. So your approval of this will also approve that fix.
Are there any questions from the board for WIFA staff? Have we received any requests for public comment?
No request to speak on this item.
Back to the board. Any additional questions or discussion? If not, may we have a motion on agenda item 12B for resolution 2027-015?
Mr. Chairman, this is Sue Montgomery. I'll motion for the approval of WIFA Resolution 2027-015 EPCOR South Bay Potable Water Reuse Project.
Mr. Chair, this is Tim. I'll second.
Thank you, Tim. We have a motion and a second. Is there any board member discussion? No further discussion. We'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Skip 13.
We're going to do 13 and skip the rest.
Okay.
That protocol.
All right. Agenda item 13, loan resolution addendum A 2027-016, Billy and Bonnie LLC, DBA Sweet Springs Community Mobile Home Park, 920389-25. Request to amend pledge on a 100% forgivable loan. Denise. Oh, Scott.
I'm actually going to take that one.
All right.
That's okay. So yes, WIFA received a request from Billy and Bonnie LLC asking them to amend the current 100% forgivable principal loan agreement to remove the requirements for a senior lien collateral position and accepted junior lien pledge. Relatedly, they also requested WIFA to release collateral liens after completion, which would be the last disbursement of the Sweet Springs project. The information received from the borrower indicates that their inability to refinance their existing obligation, which is due in October, due to these WIFA requirements of this loan. Sweet Springs received 100% forgivable principal loan to the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, just over $680,000 for replacement of water lines and installing a storage tank and the necessary appurtenances. Sweet Springs also received subsequent WIFA approval to amend the construction scope within the loan funds available. The project is nearing completion of the priority components. The purpose of the senior lien is 100% forgivable loan is largely to ensure prompt reimbursement from the borrower for any project costs determined not to be eligible for SRF funding. on the senior lien position ensures WIFA is paid first among creditors. As the name applies, 100% forgivable loan is not anticipated to be paid back. WIFA keeps liens open for 3 years after the final disbursement due to EPA auditing requirements and the possibility that a reimbursed cost could be determined ineligible, creating a liability. However, this loan and all 100% forgivable principal loans have every disbursement reviewed by WIFA staff prior to being made. This mitigates the risk of an adverse determination by the EPA and also lessens the risk in taking a junior position. And this request is brought to you today as WIFA under policy 3.8 under the additional debt test stipulates WIFA's lien position cannot be subordinated to another lender without board approval. We should have borrower representatives Russ and Beth Chambers online, but with that I will turn it back to the board.
Thank you, Scott. And I will note for the record that Pete has left the building. And bring this back to the board. Does the board have any questions for WIFA staff? And we have the applicants online. Have we received any requests for public comment? Ben?
No request to speak on this item.
All right, bring it back to the board for any additional discussion. No additional discussion then. Maybe we have a motion on agenda item 13 for loan resolution addendum A 2027-016.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Sue Montgomery, I can make a motion for the approval of loan resolution addendum A2027-016.
Thank you, Sue. You and
Mr. Say, I'll second that.
All right, very good. We have a motion and a second. Any board member discussion? No further discussion. We will call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Chair 14 and 15, and we'll go straight to public.
We will table now 14 and 15 in the interest of time. And we'll go to agenda item 16, call to the public. This is the time for any additional public comments. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Have we received any requests for public comment? Ben?
There are no additional requests to speak on this item.
All right, thank you. Agenda item 17. This is the opportunity for members to identify any topics they would like to be placed on agenda for the future meeting. Director McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we've heard a few things that we'll update you on, but nothing explicit for agenda development. I will I'll note that in the next one. So we'll take those tabled items and make sure that those are on the next agenda as well.
Thank you, Director. Agenda item 18, next meeting, September 16, 2026, 9 a.m.
That is correct. And then also, please remember to respond to Brenda with your availability for next week for a special session to discuss the sunset draft.
Thank you very much. It is 12:36 and we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.